What's up, guys? Welcome to Harry. We've got something special today. What if Wednesday Addams discovered Harry's scar was a curse, and she was the only one dark enough to break it? Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. The Addams arrival. The first thing Wednesday Addams noticed about Hogwarts was that the castle breathed. Its stones carried the weight of centuries, exhaling faint heat and whispers through their joints, as if they resented still having to host this parade of innocent little spellcasters. She respected that. Resentment gave a structure character. She arrived not through the front gate, but through the shadow between two torch flames that never quite touched, an Addams family method of travel no one in the wizarding world had classified. A few students in the entrance hall turned just in time to see a slim, dark-haired girl solidify out of nothing, adjusting her black coat like she'd simply stepped off a train. Her uniform was regulation, technically. But her tie hung loose, her collar buttoned to the throat, and the faint glint of silver at her wrist carried runes Hogwarts hadn't taught in 900 years. Professor McGonagall had been warned she was arriving, but warnings, as Wednesday learned, translated here to chaotic improvisation. McGonagall stood at the foot of the stairs, held at proud attention like an officer expecting a duel rather than a new student. "Miss Addams," she said tightly, "welcome to Hogwarts. I trust your trip was uneventful." "On the contrary," Wednesday replied, her voice moved without rising. "I saw 6 ghosts clinging to the train tunnel, 2 dead owls, and 1 interesting thing." McGonagall arched an eyebrow. "And what would that be?" "The border wards have teeth," Wednesday said. "Primitive but serviceable. They tried to taste me." McGonagall blinked, then managed. "I suppose they haven't had much Addams blood in them before." "Few things do." Wednesday's lips twitched. It might have been a smile, or the muscle memory of one. Behind her, the doors of the great hall opened and a current of sound poured out, chatter, cutlery, and the restless scrape of hundreds of young magicians pretending at old traditions. Wednesday's eyes tracked movement without bothering to turn her head. The flow of robes, the way certain names whispered louder than others. The power structure of the school wrote itself in posture and laughter. A storm of scarlet hair streaked past a few steps away, a Weasley, obviously. Loudmouths with good intentions and poor decisions. Across the room, someone stared at her too long, a green-eyed boy with a forehead that buzzed wrong in her peripherals. His scar shimmered like a cracked seal holding back something alive. She filed that away immediately. McGonagall cleared her throat, regaining her bearings. "Since you're joining midterm and your circumstances are unique, we'll forgo the usual sorting ceremony. The headmaster has approved." "I won't be sorted at all," Wednesday interrupted. Flat, not defiant, labels make people lazy. McGonagall's jaw tightened. "Be that as it may, all students must be assigned a house. It's school policy." "Then assign me to the one that tolerates snakes," Wednesday said. "They're tidy and misunderstood." She adjusted her bag on one shoulder. "Also, I was promised secret dungeons." And that was that, Slytherin. At the far end of the Great Hall, Dumbledore introduced her with the cheer of a host unveiling a new delicacy. "Miss Wednesday Addams, representing the noble and rather unconventional Addams lineage, will be joining us from the North American contingent. Let us offer her our warmth and goodwill." A scattering of polite applause rose, some genuine, most confused. Hogwarts only had room for one school-wide enigma at a time, and it was currently occupied by Harry Potter, who now watched the Addams girl with more interest than he'd shown in any student all term. Wednesday took her seat at the Slytherin table without ceremony. The bench space around her expanded subtly. No one wanted to sit too close. Across from her, Draco Malfoy straightened, flashing the routine smile his family must have practiced in mirrors. "Pleasure to meet you," he said. "Draco Malfoy." "You've probably heard," Wednesday cut him off with surgical precision, enough to be unimpressed. The snickers that followed came mostly from younger Slytherins, who darted looks between Draco and the girl now calmly decanting salt into her goblet of water. Draco's ears went pink, but before he could fire back, Wednesday turned her head toward the staff table. Umbridge smiled at her, pink, puffy, and venomous behind lace. Wednesday studied her like one might study a dying insect trying to climb out of a teacup. Classes began the next morning. Wednesday barely attended in spirit. Hogwarts education felt like a safety manual disguised as curriculum, polite magic, ethically constrained. Everything useful buried under centuries of superstition. In defense against the dark arts, Umbridge made her debut by announcing, "Practical application will not be permitted. We'll focus on understanding defensive theory only." Wednesday lifted her hand. "So this class is theater." The class erupted in uneasy laughter. Umbridge's fluttering smile didn't move her eyes. "I assume that was meant humorously, Miss Addams." "No," Wednesday said, closing her book. "If I were attempting humor, you'd know from the laughter, likely your own." Even Harry, sitting near the back, nearly choked on his suppressed grin. Umbridge's voice turned syrupy. "Detention, I think, for insolence." "Wonderful," Wednesday said. "You can tell me more about your collection of legally questionable quills while we're at it." The room froze. Even Hermione looked alarmed, as if the American had just kicked a sleeping dragon. But Wednesday wasn't mocking. Not exactly. She was diagnosing, and she'd already noticed the faint gleam of residual enchantment on the quills at Umbridge's desk. Blood-ink drafts, forbidden under modern statute, tolerated under Umbridge's authority. She filed that detail too. By the end of the day, every professor had a different opinion about her. McGonagall, wary admiration. Snape, professional curiosity shading toward wariness. Dumbledore, amused calculation. Wednesday felt their eyes and dismissed them all. The castle's corridors interested her more. Certain spaces whispered louder than others: the trophy room, the arch near the astronomy tower, and the corridor outside the hospital wing. Places where something old had ruptured, healed, and left stains the wards couldn't clean. Hogwarts wasn't haunted, it was alive and slightly ill. It wasn't until her second night that she encountered Potter again, alone in one of those restless halls. He was leaving detention, exhaustion seeping into every movement, lightning scar burning a dull red against his skin. Wednesday didn't move toward him, but she didn't move away either. "You're bleeding light," she said quietly as he passed. Harry stopped, startled. "What?" She nodded toward his forehead. "Something inside you keeps trying to get out. It's very rude of it." His hand went up by reflex, covering the scar. "You can see that. See it, smell it, hear it," she said. "It's a parasite welded to your soul. I could remove it, but not without an argument from whoever put it there." Harry stared at her like she was speaking Parseltongue. "What are you talking about?" "You don't even know me." "Not personally," Wednesday admitted, "but evil leaves fingerprints." For a long moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then Wednesday tilted her head, studying his face as if confirming a private hypothesis. "You survived a curse meant to kill you," she said. "The wound never closed because the curse never ended. I'll find out what it's feeding on." Harry didn't know what to do with that. He muttered, "Right," and started walking again. "Good night, Potter," she said after him. He hesitated mid-step, half turning. "You're not as creepy as everyone says." "Yes, I am," Wednesday replied, and vanished around a corner before his mouth could fully close. Later that week, she wrote a letter home. Short, inked in immaculate Addams black script. "Mother, Hogwarts is adequate. Their ghosts gossip too loudly, and their dark arts teacher is an idiot in a cardigan. I have met a boy whose head hums with a curse. It's beautiful in a tragic way. I intend to take it apart." She folded it neatly, blew on the wax seal, and gave it to a shadow that crawled out from under her bed to deliver. The shadow bowed, swallowed the letter, and melted into the floorboards. Wednesday extinguished her lamp and stared out through the dungeon slit window. Far above, unseen, lightning snaked across Scottish sky, tracing the outline of clouds heavy with foreboding. The castle breathed again, slow, uneasy. So did she. Something inside you keeps trying to get out. By the end of the term, that something would wish it never had. Chapter 2, Black Blood and Old Magic. Wednesday had been at Hogwarts for exactly 6 days when she decided the restricted section was an insult. Not because of the books themselves, some were genuinely unpleasant, which she appreciated, but because of the chain. A velvet rope and a lock charm a second year could sneeze through. The wizarding world's approach to forbidden knowledge was to put it on a shelf slightly out of reach and hope nobody was tall enough. She visited at 2 in the morning, wearing her uniform and not a shred of guilt. The library was empty except for Madame Pince's enchanted quill, which scratched notes to itself like a nervous bird. Wednesday walked past the rope, pressed her thumb against the lock, and fed it a thread of Addams' magic, not a spell exactly, but an invitation. The lock shuddered, considered its options, and opened. Locks were fundamentally lonely objects. They wanted to be touched. The books reacted to her differently than they did to other students. Most of them screamed when opened by unauthorized hands, a theatrical deterrent that Wednesday found embarrassing on the book's behalf. When she pulled Secrets of the Darkest Art from its shelf, it shivered, then went still. Pages turned for her willingly, like a dog rolling over for someone who finally spoke its language. She read standing up, one hand flat on the page, absorbing text through contact as much as sight. The Addams family had always read this way, letting the words bleed through skin, settling into bone memory where they'd stay forever. Horcruxes, there it was. The book described the process with the clinical detachment of a surgeon's manual: murder to fracture the soul, a vessel to contain the fragment. An anchor against death. Wednesday had known the theory since she was 11. Grandmama Addams kept a Horcrux in a pickle jar on the mantelpiece, a cautionary relic from a 15th century necromancer who tried to cheat the family out of a land deal. It sat between the decorative skulls and a vase of dead roses, and occasionally it whispered insults that no one took personally, but the book confirmed what she'd felt radiating from Potter's scar. The specific resonance, a soul fragment not housed in an object but in living flesh, parasitic, growing, feeding on the host's magical core like ivy strangling a tree from the inside. She closed the book gently, returned it to its shelf, and left the restricted section exactly as she'd found it. The lock clicked shut behind her, confused and a little lovesick. Back in the Slytherin dormitory, she sat on her bed, which she'd already modified with sheets dyed in funeral black and a pillow that smelled faintly of grave dirt, a comfort from home, and opened a leather journal, her own. No enchantments, no protections. If someone wanted to read her notes badly enough to steal them, they deserved the education. She wrote in a shorthand only her family used. Soul fragment, male origin, parasitic bond to host's magical signature, estimated age, 14 years, host unaware, institutional awareness, probable Dumbledore, institutional action, none. She underlined none twice. Then she closed the journal, tucked it beneath her mattress, and lay back with her eyes open, staring at the stone ceiling where water occasionally dripped in patterns that almost formed faces. The question wasn't whether Dumbledore knew. The question was why he'd left it there. Wednesday didn't like questions she couldn't answer in the dark. They tended to grow teeth. She slept eventually, but lightly. The castle's breathing had changed since her arrival, deeper, more watchful, as if it recognized something in her bloodline and hadn't decided yet whether to welcome it or contain it. Morning in Slytherin common room operated on a hierarchy so rigid it could have been set in concrete. The best chairs by the fire belonged to 6th and 7th years. The carved table near the window was Malfoy's, not officially, but by the gravitational pull of money and surname. 1st and 2nd years orbited the edges, and everyone else sorted themselves by ambition and alliance. Wednesday sat wherever she wanted. This morning, it was Malfoy's table. She'd arrived before him, spread her potions textbook open, and was annotating the margins with corrections when Draco appeared, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle like a pale prince with his bookends. He stopped, looked at his table, looked at Wednesday. "You're in my seat," he said. "Incorrect," Wednesday replied without looking up. "This is a table. Tables don't belong to people. People belong to tables if they're interesting enough to deserve one." Crabbe cracked his knuckles. It was meant to be threatening. It sounded like someone stepping on walnuts. Draco leaned forward, planting his hands on the table's edge. "Listen, Addams. I've been patient because you're new and because your family has a certain reputation. But this is Slytherin. We have rules." Wednesday finally lifted her eyes. They were very dark, very steady, and absolutely empty of concern. "Name one." "Respect," Draco said, "for those who have earned it." "Earned it how?" Wednesday asked. "Through your father's connections, his political donations, his evening social calendar." She turned a page. "I've met scarecrows with more self-made authority." The common room went quiet in the specific way that meant everyone was listening while pretending not to. Pansy Parkinson's teacup hovered halfway to her mouth. Blaise Zabini leaned against a pillar with the expression of someone watching excellent theater. Draco's jaw worked. He was used to being challenged by Gryffindors. That was sport, almost fun. But this was his own house, his own table, and Wednesday Addams looked at him like he was a stain on an otherwise acceptable piece of furniture. "My father," he started, "is a man who branded himself to someone else's cause and calls it loyalty," Wednesday finished. "I've read about your family, Malfoy. Wealthy, well-connected, and perpetually nailing. The Addams family has never knelt, not to kings, not to dark lords, not to bureaucrats in pointy hats." She closed her book. "So when you want to discuss respect, make sure you're offering something I can't buy at a discount." She stood, tucked the textbook under her arm, and walked out through the gap Crabbe had wisely created by stepping aside. Blaise Zabini watched her go, then looked at Draco. "I like her." "Shut up, Zabini," Draco muttered, but his voice had lost its edge. He sat down at his table, and found that Wednesday had left a single annotation in his copy of Pureblood Directory that someone had left there yesterday. It read, "Amusing fiction, 3 stars. Potions with Snape was the closest thing Hogwarts offered to a reasonable class in Wednesday's estimation." The dungeons were appropriately grim, the subject matter involved controlled destruction, and the professor actively seemed to despise hope. She could work with that. Snape had watched her brew for 3 sessions now without comment, which in his classroom was the highest form of praise. Wednesday's technique was precise but unconventional. She crushed ingredients with a black stone pestle she'd brought from home, and her stirring patterns occasionally reversed in ways that shouldn't have worked but did. Today they were brewing Draught of Peace. The potion required exact timing and a steady hand, and most of the class struggled with both. Neville Longbottom's cauldron was already producing a smell like burning hair. Wednesday finished hers 12 minutes early. The liquid shimmered silver-blue, textbook perfect, but with a faintly darker undertone that Snape noticed immediately. He swept to her station, black robes trailing like a verdict. He peered into the cauldron. "You've added hellebore root beyond the prescribed measure," he said. "Half a gram," Wednesday confirmed. The standard recipe underestimates the interaction between moonstone and syrup of hellebore. The additional half gram stabilizes the emotive resonance. Drink the textbook version and you get temporary peace. Drink mine and you understand why peace is a choice. Snape stared at her for a very long 3 seconds. 5 points to Slytherin, he said, and moved on. From across the room, Hermione Granger looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Not because she resented the points, Gryffindor had plenty, but because Wednesday had just casually improved a potion that Hermione had been brewing perfectly by the book for 5 years. After class, Hermione intercepted Wednesday in the corridor. Her approach was direct, which Wednesday appreciated. "That modification to the draft of peace," Hermione said, falling into step beside her. "Where did you learn it?" "My grandmother's kitchen," Wednesday said. "She uses it to season soup." Hermione's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Your grandmother put stabilized hellebore extract in soup. Addams family meals are not for the faint of heart or stomach." Wednesday glanced sideways. "You're Granger, the one who reads everything." "I study," Hermione corrected, a note of pride in it. "So do I," Wednesday said. "The difference is I also practice what I learn, on living things preferably." Hermione's step faltered slightly. "That's a joke, right?" Wednesday didn't answer, which was worse. They walked in silence for a few paces before Hermione tried again. "I heard what you said to Umbridge on your first day, about the quills." "Everyone heard it, that was the point." "Those quills," Hermione said carefully. "You know what they do." "Blood quills," Wednesday said as casually as if naming a flower. "They carve whatever you write into the back of your hand using your own blood as ink, banned under the decree for the reasonable restriction of underage torture, subsection 4. But Umbridge has ministry backing, so nobody's filed a complaint." Hermione stopped walking. "Harry's been using one, in detention. He won't talk about it, but I've seen his hand." "I know," Wednesday said. She hadn't stopped, and Hermione had to jog to catch up. "I noticed the scarring pattern the second day. Healed over but still raw beneath the surface tissue. She's had him write the same phrase repeatedly." "How could you possibly know that from looking at his hand?" "The same way I know you haven't slept properly in 6 days, your left shoulder aches from carrying too many books, and you're worried about something much larger than quills." Wednesday paused at the junction of 2 corridors. "I notice things, Granger. It's a family trait. Some families pass down eye color. Mine passed down the ability to read suffering like a book." She turned left without saying goodbye, leaving Hermione standing in the hallway, holding her bag strap with the hand that, now that she thought about it, was rubbing her aching left shoulder. Wednesday spent the next 3 days building a map. Not a physical map, though she was tempted. The Addams family had a long tradition of cartography, usually of places no one wanted to go. This map was behavioral. She tracked Harry Potter's schedule, his movements, his companions, and most importantly, his episodes. They came without warning. She'd be 2 corridors away and feel it, a pulse of wrongness, like a heartbeat skipping in a chest that wasn't his. Harry would grip his forehead, his face would drain of color, and for a few seconds his eyes would flicker with something that didn't belong to him. Something hungry and cold and very, very old. The episodes happened more frequently at night. Twice she followed the resonance to Gryffindor Tower's general vicinity and felt the curse pulse throbbing through stone walls like a bass note too low to hear but heavy enough to shake the floor. Whatever lived in that scar was getting stronger, or angrier, or both. She also watched Dumbledore. The headmaster was difficult to observe because he was always observing everyone else. Those half-moon spectacles weren't just for reading, they were instruments of quiet surveillance, cataloging behavior and filing it away in whatever vast internal library he maintained. Wednesday recognized the technique because she used it herself, but there were tells. When Dumbledore looked at Harry, something shifted behind his eyes, a calculation so carefully masked it was nearly invisible. Fondness, yes, genuine care, probably, but also assessment. The way a chess player looks at a piece that hasn't yet made its decisive move. He knew about the Horcrux. Wednesday was certain of it now. The question of why he'd left it there had graduated from suspicion to conviction, and it was growing sharper every day. By Thursday, she'd had enough of watching. Dumbledore's office was guarded by a gargoyle that demanded a password. Wednesday stood before it at 9 in the evening, hands in her pockets, and said nothing. The gargoyle stared. Wednesday stared back. "Password," the gargoyle ventured. "No," Wednesday said, "but I'd like to speak with the headmaster." You can either let me up or I'll have a conversation with the stonework, and I assure you, I'm very persuasive with inanimate objects. I once convinced a cemetery gate to relocate to my bedroom. The gargoyle considered this. Then, to its own apparent surprise, it stepped aside. Wednesday climbed the spiral staircase and knocked once. The door opened before her knuckle left the wood. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, looking exactly as she'd expected, composed, warm, and layered in deception like an onion made of good intentions. Fawkes the Phoenix perched on his stand, feathers gleaming, watching her with the frank appraisal of a creature that had burned and been reborn enough times to recognize fire in others. "Miss Addams," Dumbledore said, gesturing to a chair, "I wondered when you'd visit. Lemon drop. I don't eat things offered by people I'm about to interrogate," Wednesday said, but she sat. The chair was comfortable, which she found suspicious. Comfortable chairs were designed to make people compliant. She sat on its edge instead. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. It was, Wednesday noted, a weaponized twinkle deployed to disarm. Interrogate is a strong word. I chose it deliberately. She folded her hands in her lap. What's living inside Harry Potter's scar? The twinkle didn't falter, but something behind it stiffened. A wall going up, disguised as a smile. Dumbledore tilted his head, the way old men do when pretending to consider something they've already decided about. "Harry's scar is a remnant of powerful dark magic," he said carefully, "a mark left by Voldemort's curse. It has certain properties." "Properties," Wednesday repeated. "That's a generous word for a soul fragment." The office went very still. Even the silver instruments on the shelves seemed to hold their breath. Dumbledore's expression didn't change, but his hands, which had been loosely folded, pressed together, fingertip to fingertip. A containment gesture. Wednesday's grandmother used the same one when she was deciding how much truth to release into the wild. "That is a significant accusation," he said quietly. "It's a significant parasite," Wednesday replied. "I've felt it pulsing through the castle since I arrived. It resonates at a frequency consistent with a fractured human soul, specifically, a fragment created through murder and housed in a living vessel. The magical signature matches what the history books attribute to Tom Riddle." She paused. "You already know all of this." Silence stretched between them like a wire drawn taut. Dumbledore removed his glasses, polished them on his sleeve, and replaced them. It was the first unguarded gesture she'd seen him make, not a performance, but a genuine need to buy 2 seconds of thinking time. "Miss Addams," he said finally, "there are matters of extraordinary complexity at play, matters that involve forces and prophecies far older than me," Wednesday finished. "I'm an Addams. My family was old when Hogwarts was a thought in 4 friends' heads. Don't condescend to me about age." "I wasn't going to say age," Dumbledore said, and for the first time his voice carried an edge, not anger, something closer to weariness. The fatigue of a man who'd been carrying a terrible weight so long he'd forgotten it wasn't part of his skeleton. "I was going to say far older than any single solution. The situation with Harry is part of a larger picture, a picture that requires him to carry a piece of Voldemort's soul inside his skull indefinitely," Wednesday asked. "While it feeds on his magic, amplifies his suffering, and provides Voldemort a direct window into his mind." Dumbledore said nothing. "You know what it is," Wednesday said, standing. "You've known for years, and you've done nothing." "I have done a great deal," Dumbledore said quietly. "More than you know. For the war effort, perhaps. For Harry Potter, the human being, nothing that matters." She walked to the door. "You've been protecting the world, Headmaster, but nobody's been protecting him." She reached for the handle. "Miss Addams," Dumbledore's voice stopped her. She turned. His face had changed. The grandfather mask had slipped, revealing something older, harder, and genuinely conflicted beneath. "If you attempt to remove it without understanding the full nature of the connection, you could kill him." "I'm aware," Wednesday said. "That's why I'm going to understand it fully before I attempt anything. Unlike some people in this room, I don't gamble with other people's lives." She left. The door closed softly behind her. Dumbledore sat alone for a long time. Fawkes trilled a low, mournful note. "Yes," Dumbledore murmured, "I was afraid of that. On Friday, the thing in Harry's scar threw a tantrum." Wednesday was in the library, cross-referencing soul-bonding theory with Addams' family grimoire notes she'd transcribed from memory, when the pulse hit her like a fist to the sternum. Hot, furious, and laced with intent, not Harry's emotions, the fragments. Something had agitated it, and it was pressing against the walls of its cage. She closed her book and followed the resonance. It led her to the 5th-floor corridor, where Harry was on his knees, one hand braced against the wall, the other pressed so hard against his scar that his nails had drawn blood. His breathing came in ragged gasps, and his eyes, when they flickered open, were his own, then not his own, then his own again, cycling like a signal fighting through static. Ron Weasley crouched beside him, looking terrified. Harry, mate, talk to me," He can't hear you right now, Wednesday said from behind them. Ron spun, wand half raised. What the Addams, what are you doing here? Being useful. She knelt beside Harry, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his scar. It smelled like ozone and old blood. Potter, listen to my voice. Whatever you're seeing isn't real. It's a transmission, not a memory. Push it out. Harry's mouth moved. No sound came out. Wednesday reached into her coat pocket and withdrew a small glass vial filled with something dark and viscous, not a potion, but a compound. Grave soil from the Addams family plot, mixed with powdered iron and 3 drops of her own blood, prepared the night she arrived. She uncorked it and pressed it to Harry's lips. Drink, she said. Ron grabbed her wrist. Are you mental? You can't just Weasley, Wednesday said, and her voice carried a frequency that made Ron's hand release on instinct, as if he'd touched something that knew exactly where his tendons were. This is a grounding agent. Grave dirt, iron, and blood from someone whose family has been telling death not today for 600 years. It won't cure him, it will quiet the noise long enough for him to come back. Ron looked at Harry, whose face had gone gray, then back at Wednesday. If you hurt him, then you'll have my permission to hex me into next week. Now move. Ron moved. Wednesday tilted the vial. Harry swallowed reflexively, coughed, and then like a radio finding its frequency, his eyes cleared. Green. Just green, he slumped against the wall, breathing hard. What was that? He managed. You were having a vision, Wednesday said, recorking the vial. The parasite in your scar was receiving a signal from its source. You were caught in the transmission. Harry wiped blood from his forehead with a shaking hand. Voldemort, I saw he was angry. Someone disappointed him. There was screaming. I don't need the details yet, Wednesday said. Right now I need you to tell me how often this happens. Harry and Ron exchanged glances, the kind of glance that said, do we trust her? And do we have a choice? More this year than ever, Harry said finally. A few times a week, sometimes more. Dumbledore won't look at me. He's avoiding me. And every time it happens, it's getting worse, longer, harder to pull out of. Wednesday nodded. This confirmed her timeline. The fragment was growing more active, either because Voldemort was getting stronger or because the Horcrux itself was maturing, rooting deeper into Harry's magical core. Possibly both. The thing in your head, she said, it's not just a scar, it's not just a connection, it's a piece of him. Literally, a fragment of his soul lodged in your skull since the night he tried to kill you. Harry went very still. Ron's mouth fell open. That's not, Ron sputtered. It is, Wednesday said, and Dumbledore knows. The silence that followed was the loudest sound Wednesday had ever heard in this castle. Harry looked at her, through her. His eyes were the eyes of someone who'd just been told the lock on their cage was part of their own body. How do you know? He asked, quiet, controlled, the kind of controlled that comes right before something breaks. Because I come from a family that has worked with death magic for centuries, Wednesday said. Horcruxes aren't a mystery to us. They're an abomination we've studied, cataloged, and destroyed. The one in your scar is crude, a fragment created accidentally, fused to you by the killing curse that was meant to end your life. It's been growing since you were a baby, feeding on your magic, amplifying your emotions, giving Voldemort a direct line into your mind. Harry's hand went to his scar again. This time he touched it like it was something alien, something that didn't belong to him, which it didn't. Dumbledore knows, Harry repeated, not a question anymore, a stone being laid. He's known for some time, I believe, Wednesday said. I asked him directly, he didn't deny it, he deflected, which is the same thing with better manners. Harry closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had changed. The lost, desperate quality that Wednesday had observed all week, the floundering of a boy kept in the dark by people who claimed to love him, was being replaced by something colder. Not cruel, just done. Can you remove it? He asked. Yes, Wednesday said, but not tonight and not without preparation. The Horcrux is entangled with your magical core. Pull it out carelessly and I'll kill you. Pull it out correctly and you'll be free of him completely. No more visions, no more pain, no more leash. Harry looked at her for a long time, then he held out his hand. Wednesday regarded it. She wasn't one for handshakes, they were unhygienic and symbolically hollow. But she recognized the gesture for what it was, not friendship. Not yet an agreement between two people who had decided, independently, that the adults in the room had failed. She took his hand. His grip was stronger than she expected. Hers was colder than he expected. One condition, she said. What? When this is done, you owe me a favor, unspecified, to be collected at a time of my choosing. Harry almost smiled, almost. You sound like a Slytherin. I am a Slytherin, Wednesday said, by assignment if not by temperament, and the Addams family always collects. Ron, who had been watching this entire exchange with the expression of a man watching his best friend shake hands with a beautiful venomous snake, said, I don't trust you. Good, Wednesday said, releasing Harry's hand. Trust is a currency for people who can't verify. I'd rather you watch me like a hawk and confirmed my intentions through evidence. Ron blinked. That's actually reasonable. Don't sound so surprised, it's rude. She stood, straightening her coat. I'll need access to Harry for regular observation. The Horcrux's behavior patterns will inform the removal method, and I'll need Granger. Hermione, Ron asked. Why? Because she's the most competent researcher in this school and she'll insist on vetting everything I do anyway. Better to have her inside the process than outside it asking inconvenient questions. She was 2 steps down the corridor when Harry called after her. Wednesday, she paused. It was the first time he'd used her actual name. Thank you, he said, for telling me the truth. Wednesday considered this. Gratitude made her uncomfortable, not because she disliked it, but because she had so little practice receiving it. Don't thank me yet, she said. The truth was the easy part. She walked away. Behind her, she heard Ron mutter, Mate, are we really doing this? And Harry's reply, quiet but iron, yeah, we are. That night, Wednesday sat in the Slytherin common room long after everyone else had gone to bed. The fire had burned down to embers that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. She had her journal open, but she wasn't writing. She was thinking. The Horcrux was more deeply embedded than she'd initially estimated. 14 years of symbiosis. The fragment had wound itself into Harry's magical pathways, the way tree roots cracked through stone, slowly, invisibly, and with devastating structural consequences. Removing it wasn't like pulling a splinter. It was like performing surgery on a foundation without bringing down the house. She'd need old magic, Addams magic. The kind that didn't flinch at death because it was built from death, from the understanding that endings were just transitions, and the barrier between living and dead was a door, not a wall. She'd need components she couldn't find at Hogwarts, bone dust from a willing ancestor, iron forged in a graveyard, a binding cord woven from the hair of 3 generations. The Addams family vault held all of these and more, but accessing it would mean leaving school grounds, which would mean complications. And she'd need to move fast, because Dumbledore now knew she knew. And Dumbledore, for all his grandfatherly warmth, was a strategist who did not tolerate variables he couldn't control. She was, at this moment, the most dangerous variable in his carefully constructed equation. The fire popped. A log collapsed, sending a shower of sparks into the dark. Wednesday closed her journal and looked into the dying flames. Somewhere above her, 5 floors up and behind a password-guarded door, Dumbledore was probably having the same sleepless night, recalculating. Adjusting, good, let him adjust. The Addams family didn't play chess. They played a game much older with fewer rules and higher stakes. And Wednesday always played to win. The embers faded. The common room went dark. In the boys' dormitory of Gryffindor Tower, Harry Potter lay awake, staring at the canopy of his bed, one hand resting on a scar that had stopped hurting for the first time in weeks. Not healed, not yet, but quieter. Like something inside, it had finally realized it was being hunted. Chapter 3. The diagnosis. Harry had never felt silence like this before. It wasn't the peaceful kind that came after a storm, it was the tense, watchful quiet of something dangerous listening back. His scar didn't hum that morning, it simmered, like a live ember buried under skin. The ache wasn't gone, but muted, as if the parasite had withdrawn deeper to observe. Ron and Hermione noticed he was different at breakfast. Ron noticed because he was eating slower. Hermione noticed because she was Hermione. What did you do? She demanded the moment Harry sat down with a bowl of porridge he clearly wasn't going to touch. I didn't do anything, Harry said, eyes on the table. You talked to her, Hermione said, lowering her voice. Harry looked up. So what if I did? Hermione's expression darted between frustration and fear. Wednesday Addams has been here 2 weeks and she's already bypassed the restricted section lock, verbally flayed half of Slytherin and earned a private meeting with Dumbledore. You realize she's dangerous. Harry's spoon clinked against the bowl. Yeah, he said quietly, that's the point. Before Hermione could respond, Ron's fork froze halfway to his mouth. She's looking at us, he whispered. Across the hall, Wednesday sat at the Slytherin table, posture perfect, expression unreadable, and yes, she was staring directly at them. Not glaring, just evaluating. Like she already knew how this conversation would go and was waiting to see if they'd figure it out too. Harry met her gaze. She inclined her head once, almost imperceptibly. An agreement unspoken, he stood. Come on. Ron blinked. Where are we going? To find out how dead I am inside, Harry said deadpan. Ron dropped his fork. They met in the unused classroom Wednesday had quietly converted into what she called a workroom. It smelled faintly of dust and iron. Runes scarred the floor in a geometric web, carved not into the stone but out of shadow, like the dark itself had been trained to obey math. Hermione arrived a few minutes after Harry, having, of course, followed them. I knew it, she said, hands on hips. Do you ever stop breaking rules? Wednesday was setting out instruments, 3 glass phials of varying colors, a narrow dagger made of obsidian, and a circle of salt so fine it glimmered like powdered diamond. Rules, she said without looking up, exist so that intelligent people can selectively ignore them. It's also how people end up expelled, Hermione shot back. If I fail, Potter ends up dead, Wednesday said. Expulsion seems less concerning. That diffused Hermione's protest faster than any argument could have. She crossed her arms, stern but pale. You're really going to what cut him open? Wednesday finally looked up. Not physically, that would be messy. Her eyes flicked to Harry. Though if you faint easily, I suggest you sit. I don't faint, Harry said automatically, even though he did frequently near Dementors and occasionally during Quidditch injuries. Excellent, Wednesday murmured. Hold still. She drew a thin thread of black silk from her pocket, knotted at regular intervals with tiny silver beads. When she wrapped it around Harry's wrist, it felt colder than ice. This is a magical diagnostic conduit, she said. The Addams method doesn't rely on spells. We let your soul describe itself honestly. Hermione moved closer despite herself, curiosity overcoming fear. That's soul divination, that's illegal. Everything useful is illegal, Wednesday said. Your wand, please. Harry handed it over. She placed it inside the salt circle, pointed toward the center rune. Then she pricked her own thumb with the obsidian blade. The droplet of blood fell into the pattern and disappeared instantly, absorbed like ink into parchment. The air temperature dropped. The torches along the walls flickered in unison. Wednesday's tone sharpened. Focus on the scar, don't touch it. Just acknowledge it. Harry closed his eyes. The ache behind his forehead responded like it was waiting for the invitation. Pressure, buzzing, then stop, Wednesday said sharply. The salt circle trembled. Lines of light crawled up from the floor, outlining Harry's body like a constellation. It hovered in midair, translucent, pulsing softly except above his forehead, where a knot of black-red light coiled and throbbed. Hermione gasped. Ron swore under his breath. There it is, Wednesday said. Her voice had changed, lower, almost reverent. A fragmented soul, lodged along the periphery of the host's magical cortex. See how it pushes inward. Hermione stepped forward, studying the spectral projection. It's alive, it's moving, like it's reacting to us. It's reacting to me, Wednesday corrected. It recognizes a predator. The entity inside the scar pulsed violently, shadows flaring through the projection. Harry flinched, clutching the edge of the table. Breathe, Wednesday said evenly. Don't fight it, I'm going to talk to it. Hermione's eyes widened. Talk to it, you can't. Wednesday ignored her. She moved closer to the circle, lowering her head slightly like a hunter approaching skittish prey. Whoever you are, she said, voice calm and steady, you've been living inside someone else's body for 14 years. He didn't ask for you. I don't care whether you were made accidentally or through incompetence. Your lease has expired. The entity pulsed again, sharper now, sending a shock of pain through Harry's skull. He staggered. Ron caught him. I'll take that as an objection, Wednesday murmured, extending her finger toward the projection but not touching it. The surrounding runes shivered, realigning around her gesture. Hermione couldn't look away. The black-red energy strained against its cage, flickering images now, flashes of a pale face, reptilian eyes, a whisper of words none of them wanted to understand. Wednesday met those images head-on, unflinching. Interesting, she whispered. You think you're eternal. The air hummed low and electric. Shadows tightened around the circle. Then just as suddenly everything went still. The light winked out. The salt circle fell quiet. Harry groaned. Wednesday released the silk thread, cut it once with her nail, and tossed the piece into the air where it vanished like smoke. It's confirmed, she said flatly. A Horcrux, partial containment, anchored to you by the killing curse itself, a side effect of love magic overlapping death magic, ingenious, accidental, and profoundly disgusting. Ron blinked. So. That means he's what, cursed forever? I didn't say forever. Wednesday was already cleaning the dagger. But it's harder than cutting out a rot. You have to teach the body to expel it. That means isolating his magical signature from the Invader S, which is the fun part. Hermione leaned against the desk, pale. You make this sound like a laboratory procedure. It is, Wednesday said, just with blood instead of pipettes. Her tone wasn't cruel, just factual. Harry sat up slowly. You said you could remove it. I can, Wednesday said, but now that I've seen it, I know what it requires. And what's that? She met his gaze for the first time since the ritual. Something old, something Hogwarts doesn't teach, the Ministry doesn't regulate, and Dumbledore pretends doesn't exist. That's comforting, Ron muttered. Wednesday ignored him. The fragment's tether runs through your magical core like thread in cloth. Cutting it means tearing out whatever part of you it's fused to. You'll need a death sigil drawn from ancestral material, blood, bone, or something born of grief willingly given. She paused, almost smiling. Luckily, my family collects grief like other people collect postage stamps. Hermione's hand went to her forehead. You're talking about necromancy. I'm talking about accuracy, Wednesday said. The Addams ritual repertoire predates necromancy by centuries. We use the language of death to correct life's mistakes. This," she gestured at Harry, "is a mistake that's been left uncorrected too long." Hermione looked torn between horror and fascination. It's forbidden for a reason. Because most people are bad at it," Wednesday said. "I'm not." The words carried no arrogance, just absolute certainty. It was the kind of confidence that made both Ron and Hermione fall silent again because anything they said would sound smaller by comparison. Harry, though, was watching her differently, not with fear, not even with awe. With recognition, the strange comfort of meeting someone as tired of being used as he was, he said, "What do we need to do? First, gather things Hogwarts doesn't stock." Wednesday packed her tools back into her case. "Second, find a private enough place to perform a ritual that blurs the line between living and dead." "And then?" Harry asked. "Then," she said, fastening the case, "I break the universe's most impressive example of poor workmanship." That week blurred into planning. They met between classes, always in unused rooms where even paintings avoided looking. Hermione kept her protests quieter but more frequent, while Ron mostly hovered protectively behind Harry like a ginger-colored shadow. Wednesday led with ferocious precision. She diagrammed the scar's effect on Harry's aura in charcoal across black parchment. She timed the cycles of his scartwinges, cross-referencing them with phases of the moon and Hogwarts ley lines. She wrote notes in Latin that made Filch's cat hiss when she walked past them. Unbeknownst to them, the disturbance didn't go unnoticed. Snape had always been too observant for anyone's comfort. That night, his patrol took him through the upper dungeon where faint traces of blood magic still lingered in the air. He followed the scent the way a predator follows smoke until he reached the converted workroom. The salt circle was gone, but the residual signature of Addams' magic clung to the stone, metallic, ancient, and faintly amused. He knelt, touched the floor with 2 fingers. Snape had known dark magic, served it, dismantled it, been rebuilt by it. But this was different, controlled, surgical, almost elegant, and Potter's magical residue wove through it like a submerged current. He stood slowly, black eyes sharpening. So Potter had found an ally with a talent for subversion, one Dumbledore hadn't planned for. He'd need to decide whether that was a disaster or salvation. The week ended with a storm, rain thick against the windows, thunder bruising the sky. Wednesday sat alone in the common room, drafting a letter. Her handwriting was precise, identical to the outline she'd used for autopsy reports back home. To Mother, I've located the infestation. It's a soul fragment lodged behind a boy's scar. Curious case of death magic bonding through reflected love, very sentimental. The headmaster knew. Naturally, he does nothing. I'll require access to the family vault soon. Please inform Father to release the gravitung tools in the Umbra bell jar. Also send Pugsley something to occupy him, ideally an explosive. She sealed it with her family crest, a skeletal hand holding a rose, and set it beside her candle. Within seconds, the flame bent sideways, swallowed the letter, and carried it into shadow. When she looked up, Draco Malfoy was standing halfway across the room, clearly having seen more than he was supposed to. "You know," he said, sounding bored but not convincing anyone, "the Ministry bans private correspondence spells." "Then it's fortunate I don't care what the Ministry thinks," Wednesday said, not bothering to hide her quill. Draco hesitated, curiosity warring with pride. "You're helping Potter, aren't you?" Wednesday didn't look at him. "I'm helping myself. He's just an interesting side effect." "Right," Draco said dryly. "Of course, helping Potter is such a Slytherin thing to do." She finally turned, eyes dark with amusement. "You mistake Slytherin's flaw for my own. I'm not loyal to factions, only outcomes." Draco frowned. "And what's the outcome you want?" "The same as any reasonable person," Wednesday said lightly, standing. "To see what happens when the unkillable finally dies." The storm outside cracked, and in the flicker of the lightning her reflection in the window didn't move exactly like she did. The castle was already reacting to her. Up in Gryffindor Tower, Harry dreamed. He was standing in a void of ash and water. Across the distance, a figure moved, tall, pale, with slitted eyes and fragmented outlines, as though it were being reflected through shattered glass. "You think she can save you?" the voice hissed. Harry didn't respond. He'd learned not to in these visions. "She meddles with powers she cannot understand. If she tries to touch me, she'll burn." But beneath the oily tone, something else, fear, faint, real, and shaking. Harry smiled in the dream, not kindly. "She isn't trying to save me," he said. "She's trying to destroy you." Then he woke to thunder. Wednesday was already awake when Harry found her in the corridor before breakfast. "You felt it too," she said without asking. Harry nodded. "He knows what you're doing. I expected nothing less. What happens now?" Wednesday looked at him, calm as always, braid perfectly neat despite the storm. "Now," she said, almost gentle, "we stop diagnosing and start preparing for surgery." Harry swallowed hard, then smiled faintly. "You really don't do small talk, do you?" Why would I? Wednesday said. It never saved anyone. Chapter 4, The Inquisitor and the Witch. The morning after Harry's dream, the castle itself seemed to pulse with tension. The rumors had already started, they always did at Hogwarts, blooming overnight like poisonous flowers. Someone had seen Wednesday in the library at midnight. Someone swore they'd heard her chanting in an old language near the dungeons. Someone whispered she'd made a portrait cry. Wednesday ignored all of it. She de-lived her entire life surrounded by gossip. It washed off her like rain on stone. Dumbledore hadn't summoned her again, which meant he was still calculating. That suited her fine. Calculation gave her time. Her real problem was wearing pink. Dolar's Jane Umbridge had made it her personal mission to domesticate Hogwarts, and to her, Wednesday Addams was the wild creature that most needed a leash. Umbridge cornered her before lunch, appearing at the end of the charms corridor like a human rose bush in full poisonous bloom. "Miss Addams," she said, voice dripping sugar and venom in equal parts, "a moment of your time." Wednesday stopped, clasping her hands behind her back. "I wasn't aware my time was yours to allocate." The twitch at the corner of Umbridge's eye was minuscule but satisfying. "I've been hearing the most troubling reports," Umbridge said. "Unauthorized magical procedures, forbidden rituals, late-night excursions, none of which sound particularly appropriate for a young witch enrolled in our fine, law-abiding institution." "Your concern is noted," Wednesday said, expression flat as parchment. "Now dismissed. I beg your pardon, you wanted a moment, you've had it." She turned to walk away. Umbridge's hand shot out, catching the edge of her sleeve. "You will not use that tone with me, Miss Addams." Wednesday turned back very slowly. She looked down at the plump hand gripping her wrist. "Release me before the sleeve decides to eat you," she said. Umbridge blinked. "Excuse me." The cuff of Wednesday's uniform twitched. A stitched black seam unraveled like a tongue of shadow licking free, brushing Umbridge's skin. The woman yelped and jerked her hand back, eyes wide. Wednesday smoothed her sleeve as if adjusting etiquette gloves. "Clothing is like family, Professor, very protective." Umbridge's face darkened to near magenta. "Detention, tonight, my office." Wednesday tilted her head the way one might examine a particularly boring death threat. "I was beginning to feel neglected." Then she walked away. By evening, the castle's gossip vine hummed with two certainties. One, Wednesday Addams was about to die, and two, she was going to enjoy it. Umbridge's office smelled of cats and ambition smothered in perfume, sweetness gone stale. The walls were crowded with plates of mewling kittens, each one bowing or pawing pathetically as Wednesday entered. Umbridge smiled her biggest, fakest smile. "Sit." Wednesday did not. She examined one of the kitten plates instead. "Taxidermy would have been more honest," she said. Umbridge's smile strained but did not crack. "You seem to believe you're above authority, Miss Addams. That's a dangerous misconception." "Only for the authority," Wednesday replied. The woman set a quill on the desk between them, red, sharp, faintly glowing. "You'll write lines," Umbridge said sweetly, "until they've made an impression." Wednesday studied the quill, then met Umbridge's gaze. "Do you know what happens to people who try to draw my blood without permission? You think threats will frighten me. I think you assume fright is my currency." Wednesday reached forward slowly, deliberately, and took up the quill. "Let's test your toy." She pressed the nib into her palm. It didn't even prick. Magic flared and died. The enchantment short-circuited on contact, unable to drink from something that tasted wrong. Umbridge leaned forward in outrage. "What did you—" "Your quill," Wednesday said calmly, "attempted to harvest blood. It discovered the blood, objected." "What nonsense, I assure you," Wednesday said, flexing her fingers. "My blood does many things. Played dead, cried fire, even turned a priest insane once, but obey, never." She placed the quill back on the desk. "Now, Professor, if that's all, I'd like to go back to helping your favorite student not explode." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "What did you say?" "You heard me." For a moment, Umbridge stared at her, shock and calculation flickering war beneath her practiced expression. Then her voice returned, brittle. "You will not speak back to me again, is that clear?" It wasn't a request. Wednesday's voice lowered until it vibrated like distant thunder. "If you ever use cursed instruments on another student again, I'll show you exactly what dark magic is for." She turned and left before Umbridge could react. Outside in the hall, Peeves hovered upside down, grinning so hard his head seemed split in two. "Wicked little witch, are ya? She's purple." Wednesday straightened her sleeves. "Flattery noted, poltergeist. Better watch your back," Peeves cackled, spinning loops overhead. "Pink toads got claws. Then she'll learn what happens when she scratches an atom." By next day, Umbridge's fury had transformed into policy. A new educational decree pasted itself to the notice board by breakfast. Any use of non-ministry approved spells, rituals, or magical practices is expressly forbidden. Violation will result in immediate suspension and wand confiscation. Harry read it twice, jaw tightening. "She's targeting you. She's targeting control," Wednesday corrected, glancing over the parchment. I simply irritate her because I don't fit within it. She's not going to let this go, neither am I. The determination in her tone made both Ron and Hermione exchange looks. Please tell me you're not planning to curse her, Hermione muttered. Wednesday didn't answer directly. Cursing implies waste. I prefer demonstration. By afternoon, opportunity presented itself in defense against the dark arts class. Umbridge was droning about proper ministry-sanctioned wand movements, which to anyone with eyes looked like feeble dance routines for the terminally afraid. Wednesday sat 3 rows back, wand motionless. And as we see, Umbridge trilled, control and restraint separate the righteous witch from the reckless sorceress. Can anyone tell us why casting any dark countercurse would risk? Wednesday raised her hand. Umbridge blinked. Yes, Miss Addams. Because fear doesn't distinguish between defense and offense, Wednesday said evenly. It just makes people stupid. Giggles rippled across the classroom. Umbridge smiled a smile one step away from strangulation. Perhaps you'd like to demonstrate proper restraint for the class. With pleasure. Wednesday stood crossed to the front and faced a caged fake boggart the size of a tea chest. The cage trembled faintly, as if even the illusion inside recognized predator scent. Let's imagine, Wednesday said, this creature represents an incoming curse. Your method would be defensive, weak shields, hesitation, denial. She flicked her wand. The cage disintegrated into shadow. The boggart took shape, a grotesque, flickering form that tried to decide what she feared most. It failed. It flickered, confused, before freezing halfway into Voldemort's shape. Wednesday smiled like someone greeting an old pet. Wrong guess. She whispered a curse none of them recognized. It was Latin. It sounded like stone grinding bone. The boggart flailed once and imploded, not banished by laughter, but annihilated into dust that disintegrated midair. Silence filled the room. Wednesday turned back to Umbridge calmly. Restraint is useful, so is the ability to end a threat before it starts. Umbridge's face locked. 10 points from Slytherin for competence. They asked for arrogance. Wednesday smiled faintly. If you prefer self-destruction, I won't argue. She returned to her seat. Umbridge's hands trembled just slightly as she pretended to resume the lesson. Harry caught her eye across the room. His lips twitched somewhere between disbelief and admiration. That evening, as shadows lengthened across the lake, the air buzzed. A parchment envelope materialized above Wednesday's head and dropped neatly into her lap. The wax seal bore the ministry crest. Summons, she opened it slowly. You are hereby requested to attend a disciplinary hearing under Educational Decree No. 26 for use of non-ministry sanctioned sorcery. Wednesday folded the letter, slipped it into her coat pocket, and smiled, a small, cold smile. Finally, she murmured, they noticed. The disciplinary hearing convened 3 days later in the Great Hall, repurposed into a courtroom of spectacle. Umbridge sat at its center like an overstuffed spider, a panel of ministry officials arrayed beside her. Dumbledore presided, neutral, at least outwardly, eyes distant, calculating. Students filled the benches, even ghosts attended. The rumor mill had achieved fever pitch. Addams versus Umbridge, the trial of the year. Wednesday stood alone before them, posture slow, deliberate, unbowed. Miss Addams, Umbridge said with insufferable sweetness, we are here to determine the extent of your transgressions. You have been accused of practicing dark arts on school grounds. Yes, Wednesday said. The hall rippled with sound. Umbridge blinked. Pardon, yes, she repeated calmly. I practiced them. They work better. Why pretend otherwise? Umbridge sputtered. You admit. Of course I admit. Wednesday stepped closer, voice calm as ice. You want to police darkness while ignoring the darkness eating one of your students alive. You'll torture children with cursed quills to enforce obedience. Tell me, Madam Undersecretary, which version of the dark arts should I fear? Yours or mine? Several students gasped aloud. Even McGonagall's brows twitched upward. Dumbledore's fingers steepled, his gaze sharp now watchful. Umbridge pressed a hand to her chest, breathing fast. Such insolence, you will be expelled. Expel me and admit Hogwarts failed to protect the boy who lived from actual black magic, Wednesday said, voice cutting through the acrid air. You can't risk that headline. A murmur broke through the officials. One of them, a nervy-looking wizard in pinstripes, whispered frantically to Umbridge. She paled further and shot Wednesday a look of undisguised hatred. Dumbledore's voice slid smoothly into the gap. Perhaps we should move toward conclusion. Miss Addams, would you agree to limit your experiments while attending class? Define limit, Wednesday said. Dumbledore almost smiled. Within reason. Very well, I'll define reason. She turned toward Umbridge again. If I find more cursed quills, that's unreasonable. If anyone attempts to harm Potter again under your supervision, I'll redefine civility until it no longer applies. Dumbledore cleared his throat suddenly. That will suffice. The hearing adjourned in chaos. Students filed out buzzing with adrenaline. Harry, Ron, and Hermione slipped through the crowd to meet her near the stairs. That, Ron said breathlessly, was horrifying. I loved it. She made the ministry back down, Hermione whispered. I didn't even think that was possible. Harry just looked at Wednesday in silence until she met his gaze. You didn't do that for you, he said. No, she said. I did it because people like Umbridge keep chaos tethered. Sometimes you have to cut the tether to let monsters out so the right ones eat the wrong ones first. Her lips twitched. Now come, we've wasted enough time playing politics. It's time to prepare for your surgery. That night lightning cracked again above the towers. Far below in the forbidden forest something stirred, the restless movement of creatures uneasy with imbalance. Dark things felt dark things. Deep in his hiding place, Voldemort paused mid-conversation, the hairs on his neck prickling. She was preparing something. He could feel it through the echo of the lost fragment. For all his arrogance, a memory as old as his first experiment whispered uneasily, Not all darkness serves me. In the castle, Wednesday Addams looked out her window at the same storm and hummed softly. A tune about dissection, perhaps, or destiny. Chapter 5. What the Dead Remember. The forbidden forest waited in the rain like a cathedral made of shadows. Wednesday stood at its edge in her long black coat, wand hidden, eyes lifting toward the canopy where lightning flashed like camera shutters. Every inch of her knew this kind of darkness. It wasn't evil, it just didn't apologize for existing. Harry shivered beside her. You're sure this will work? No, Wednesday said, stepping forward, but uncertainty is the chef's seasoning of life. Hermione adjusted her cloak nervously. You said we were coming to ask the dead something. How exactly does one ask the dead? With respect, Wednesday said, and bone dust. Ron groaned. Here we go. The forest swallowed them immediately. Rain softened to mist under the branches. Every sound, footstep, breath, heartbeat grew intimate. Wednesday walked as if she belonged here, and perhaps she did. Creatures rustled in the undergrowth but didn't approach. Whatever they smelled on her outweighed curiosity. At the clearing near the lake, she stopped. This is where Voldemort's curse rebounded, she said. Death left fingerprints here. If we want to know how the curse grafted his soul to Harry's, the dead who felt its echo will remember. She knelt and unfastened her satchel inside, jars layered with earth so black it shimmered like metal, a vial of her own blood, and a small silver bell dull with tarnish. Addams' necromancy isn't like ghost summoning, she explained while preparing the circle. Ghosts are echoes. I want information that requires memory. Harry crouched beside her, watching the precise movements of her fingers. You can really talk to the dead. Not talk, Wednesday said. They don't use words, they use tone, impulse, images. You interpret. Hermione frowned. That sounds dangerous. So does ignorance, Wednesday said dryly. She began drawing symbols into the mud, curves intertwining like vines around an invisible heart. Rain blurred some of it, but she seemed to anticipate that. Each stroke pulsed faintly, glowing through the wet darkness. Hold the bell, she said, handing it to Harry. When I tell you, ring it once. What happens if I ring it twice? Don't. Harry swallowed. Right. Ron took half a step back. In case anyone's wondering, I'll just watch from here. Cowardice is often wisdom in disguise, Wednesday said, amused. Stay near Hermione. I'm not a coward, Ron muttered, just allergic to ancient death rituals. You're improving already. She sliced her palm with an obsidian blade, letting the blood drip into the markings. The glow brightened, threads of crimson weaving through silver-blue lines. The air thickened, the intangible heaviness of a room that's suddenly audience to something not entirely alive. Harry, she said softly. He rang the bell. The sound didn't travel far, but it stayed. Vibrating through the trees into the soil, echoing like it didn't want to stop. The rain paused impossibly. And then they heard it, whispers, hundreds of them, not loud, not frightening, just old. Hermione gasped as faint shapes began to appear around the circle, impressions of faces forming out of mist, none distinct, all faded. Wednesday didn't flinch. She extended both hands, murmuring in the old dialect, Addams' family words built from grief and science of endings. The forest bent closer. One voice clearer than the rest broke through, female, fragile but bright. Harry's heart clamped. Mum, Lily Potter's outline steadied in the mist, faint but present. She still glowed a little, like memory refusing to dissolve. Wednesday's eyes flickered wider for the first time all night, not with sentiment but fascination. She bowed slightly. Mrs. Potter, thank you for answering. Who are you? Lily whispered. The girl trying to remove what's killing your son slowly, Wednesday said. For a moment the mist shimmered like sunlight on glass. I know he carries a piece of the one who murdered you, Wednesday said. I need the memory of that night, how the curse fractured. Lily hesitated, glancing toward Harry. It wasn't supposed to happen like that, she said, voice trembling. Love protected him. It turned back. I felt him die and something broke, something stayed. He screamed and part of him ripped itself apart. Harry's hands clenched in the mud. Wednesday's head tilted, absorbing every syllable like data. Part of him rippled outward, she asked. Not vanished. Lily nodded faintly. It latched. It needed life to hide in. You were nearest, Wednesday murmured, but your sacrifice redirected it to your son. Yes, Lily whispered. It attached to what was left of your magic, Harry. Wednesday straightened slowly. That tells me everything. Ron exhaled shakily. Can we, end this now? Wednesday ignored him. Mrs. Potter, your son will live. I will make sure of it. Lily's shape bright and peaceful, beginning to fade. Be careful, child. That magic doesn't forgive. I don't ask forgiveness, Wednesday whispered. I ask result. Then the mist collapsed back into rain. The bell went silent. Hermione stood motionless, staring at the space where Lily had disappeared. That was science, Wednesday said, wiping her blade clean. Emotional but credible. Harry looked at her, soaked, shaking slightly from what he'd just experienced, and asked, Did you mean it, that I'll live? Yes, Wednesday said, but you'll hurt first. I already do, Harry murmured. Wednesday's gaze softened just enough to almost qualify as human. Not like this. They left the forest by midnight, drenched and silent. Hermione lingered behind with her usual flood of thoughts, while Ron muttered about dinner ghosts and dry socks. Outside the gate, Wednesday stopped Harry with a touch on his arm. You need to understand what Lily told us, she said. Her protection acted as conduit. The curse didn't just rebound, it got confused, split apart. The scar isn't infection. It's collision residue between two magic systems that weren't supposed to coexist. That sounds awful, Harry said. It is, Wednesday said, which means repairing it will require something equally awful. Harry managed a weak laugh. I assume that's where you come in. Wednesday's lips barely curved. Assume correctly. Lightning cracked above them, revealing the outline of the castle, immense, old, and listening. What happens now? Harry asked. Now I retrieve something the dead made centuries ago, she said. An artifact from my family vault. Without it, Voldemort's peace will cling too deeply to separate. We'll go with you, Harry said instantly. I was counting on that. Hermione finally caught up to the Addams estate. Hogwarts will never allow it. Then we won't ask, Wednesday said. Ron groaned. You're absolutely mad. And yet, Wednesday said lightly, here you are about to follow me. The next 2 days were preparation disguised as routine. Wednesday attended classes with her usual unnerving calm, while Harry feigned normalcy. Umbridge kept glaring from afar, but after the tribunal she avoided confrontation until, inevitably, curiosity overcame fear. Wednesday received a sealed parchment outside the Great Hall, Dumbledore's hand. Miss Addams, a word before you embark on any further experiments regarding Mr. Potter's scar. We share the same goal, safeguard his life. Please do not proceed without counsel. She folded the note neatly and fed it to the fire in the fireplace. Counsel, she said softly as it burned, is the polite word for delay. They met in the dungeons that night. Harry, Hermione, Ron, 3 nervous teenagers facing the unnerving calm of one who spoke to death like an equal. We leave tomorrow evening, Wednesday said. The vault is beneath my family estate in Sussex. We'll use Addams' shadow transit, stable, undetectable, mildly unsettling. What's mildly unsettling? Ron asked warily. Some vomiting, Wednesday said. Occasional minor possession, nothing permanent. Hermione paled. Possession. Only temporary, Wednesday assured. My ancestors are polite guests. Harry couldn't help it. He started laughing, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity was easier than fear. Wednesday just watched him, expression unreadable, then turned back to the map drawn across her desk. Once I have the relic, removing the fragment will be possible. Hermione leaned over the diagram. What relic? The bone of the Covenant, Wednesday said, tracing the drawn sigil. A fragment of ancient pact magic forged when the Addams family first learned death's language. It amplifies acts of severance. When anchored to a living soul, it can slice through metaphysical attachment. Harry blinked. So it's a knife, it's a choice, Wednesday said. Knives are only tools, the intent matters. Doesn't sound like the kind of thing we can just borrow, Ron muttered. No, Wednesday said, we ask politely. The vault will test us. If we pass, it lets us take what we need. If we fail, it keeps what's left. Hermione's voice caught. Keeps how? Don't fail, Wednesday said. That night she wrote one more letter, not to her mother, but to Dumbledore. Short, blunt, Headmaster, I intend to remove the curse. Your hesitation endangers Potter. You may try to stop me. I would enjoy that. She left the letter on his desk under moonlight, walked back through the dungeon corridor, and didn't look back. Above the great hall, the portraits whispered to each other in agitation. Even the ghosts felt the shift. Something old was about to move. In the distance, thunder rolled again. In her dormitory, Wednesday extinguished every lamp but one. The light shimmered faintly over a small jar of blood-soaked salt, the initiation marker. Tomorrow night she would bring Potter to the Addams estate. The dead had remembered. The living would pay attention soon. Harry Potter slept that night dreamlessly for the first time in years. The silence inside his skull felt like it belonged to someone else, someone waiting to be evicted. When dawn came, the sun burned behind the storm clouds. Wednesday stood at the window overlooking the grounds, distant and sharp against the gray. Dumbledore was outside with Professor Snape, gesturing toward the castle. His expression didn't touch his eyes. She could guess what he was saying, that the Addams girl was an unknown risk, that her methods were unpredictable. She smiled faintly. They would learn soon enough. Unpredictability was the only honest kind of magic. The journey into the vault awaited, and with it the choice between life and death rebuilt from bone and memory. Chapter 6. The Serpent Stirs. The journey began just after sunset. The sky was heavy with rain again, as if the clouds above Hogwarts anticipated what Wednesday Addams was about to do and preferred to mourn in advance. Wednesday led the way through the northern courtyard, her coat sweeping water off the stones. Harry followed, then Hermione and Ron, all three cloaked under concealment charms Wednesday had woven earlier, invisible to non-magical eyes, inexplicable even to magical ones. "You're sure this portal thing works?" Ron whispered as they reached the old marble arch near the edge of the grounds. "It always works," Wednesday said. "What varies is how many people vomit." Hermione's jaw tightened. "You're unnervingly calm for someone performing interdimensional travel. I was raised on worse mistakes," Wednesday said, pulling a small vial full of shadow-black liquid from her pocket. "This is the additive. It keeps the portal quiet. Otherwise, every ministry ward within a dozen miles would start screaming." Harry stepped up beside her. "Where does it open?" "My home," Wednesday answered. "The Addams estate. We call it the house that forgot the sun." Ron muttered, "Charming." Wednesday handed him the vial. "Drink." He blinked. "Wait, what?" "It'll stop your heart for 15 seconds. Easier for the portal to recognize you." Ron whitened. "It'll what?" Hermione snatched it from his hand. "He'll live. Only if he drinks," Wednesday said with a hint of amusement. "Otherwise, the shadow stream will think he's still tethered to Hogwarts and reject him mid-transit." "Reject how?" Harry asked, explosively. "Right," Ron said faintly. "Bottoms up then." He gulped it down and gasped. The color drained from his face. His knees buckled. Hermione caught him as his breath vanished. Wednesday touched the arch's keystone with her thumb. "Shadow transit, 4 passengers." The marble began to dim, veins of black spreading outward. Harry barely had time to think before the world folded inside out. They landed in darkness that wasn't quite absence, a space where smell, sound, and light layered thick together, almost fluid. Then it settled. The portal spat them out onto flagstones slick with rain. Ron took a choking breath and went sprawling, swearing loudly. "Welcome to the Addams estate," Wednesday said. "Apologies for the necrotic echo. The walls remember everyone who passes through." Hermione blinked around. It looks alive." And indeed the walls moved faintly, veins of shadow crawling under stone as if the house breathed. Iron candelabras flickered blue fire down halls lined with oil portraits of people who looked at them and occasionally winked. Harry couldn't decide if he wanted to laugh, shake, or both. "This is incredible," Hermione whispered, half in awe, half in fear. Wednesday started walking. "My family preserves its history the way magicians preserve arsenic, valuable, deadly, and mostly decorative." They followed in silence until they reached the heart of the house, a vast hall domed so high it disappeared in blackness above them. At its center stood a stair spiraling downward into light too faintly silver to be candle flame. Wednesday stopped at the top step, the vault. Harry felt something stir in his chest as he descended, like the Horcrux inside him recognized this place. It coiled, restless. Wednesday noticed. "It can feel the bone," she said. "The relic's resonance predates its creation." Voldemort's magic was drawn from old death languages. The Addams languages were older. Hermione glanced at her sharply. "Doesn't that mean we're walking into its domain?" "Or it into mine," Wednesday said, descending faster. The vault chamber was small compared to the house above, circular, simple, every surface covered in carved bones. Not human, not animal, something in between. Shelves lined the walls, holding jars, stones, and pieces of idol fragments older than recorded magic. At the center, raised on a column of obsidian, rested the bone of the Covenant, smooth, white, carved through with lines that shimmered faintly like veins of mercury. Wednesday approached, expression unreadable. "It recognizes blood." She cut her palm again, let the blood drip onto the bone. The chamber trembled lightly, shadows swaying, whispering in languages no one alive had spoken for centuries. "You'll need to ask," Hermione said under her breath, politely. Wednesday ignored her. She pressed both hands on either side of the relic and whispered, "I invoke passage." The vault replied with pressure. A voice, not sound but feeling, slid through their minds. "Who dare so openly touch bone meant for endings?" "Wednesday, Friday, Addams," she said. "Heir by contraction and inheritance. Purpose." "Excision," Wednesday said. "A parasite bound to unwilling flesh." Silence. Then that voice again, curious. "Show me." Wednesday gestured. Harry stepped forward. The bone pulsed once, then flared bright enough to cast skeletal shadows across their faces. Voldemort's fragment reacted instantly. Harry staggered, grabbing his forehead as pain spiked. Hermione shouted, "Harry!" Wednesday's hand shot out, steadying him. "Stay upright, it's less painful when it knows you're unafraid." Harry grit his teeth. The light sharpened, two energies meeting in open war. The relic hummed, scanning, and then everything went cold. "Yes," the vault whispered. "This bond reeks of death," behaved badly. Ron took an involuntary step back. "It's talking. The dead always talk," Wednesday said calmly. "We rarely listen. You seek division, it will cost." Wednesday's tone was unwavering. "Everything costs, I pay in skill." "Accepted," the voice said, and the humming stopped. The bone shimmered once and cracked, a clean fault line splitting its smooth surface. A tiny curved shard lifted itself free, drifting into her palm. Hermione exhaled shakily. Did it just give it to you?" "It lent it," Wednesday said. "This piece will lose potency once the ritual's done, then it returns itself." Ron rubbed the back of his neck. "Good. I don't want that thing hanging around my nightmares." Wednesday slipped the shard into a small glass case inside her coat and turned toward the stairs. "Time to go," she said. The house didn't let them leave easily. As they retraced their steps, the walls darkened subtly, whispers followed them. The relic drew attention the way lightning drew iron. Once outside, the rain resumed, sharp like needles. Wednesday touched the archstones again. "Same procedure," she said. "Try not to think too loudly when we cross." Hermione frowned. "Why, thought leaks," Wednesday said simply. "It attracts things." Ron paled. "What kind of things?" "The curious," Wednesday said. "Usually hungry." They barely had time to process that before the world twisted again. When Hogwarts took shape around them, Harry immediately realized something was wrong. The castle shuddered, not the physical kind, but magical. The air throbbed with tension, like a long vibration spreading through pipes and stone. Wednesday turned, face taut for the first time. He felt it. Hermione's voice was small. "Voldemort." "Yes," she said. "The Horcrux connection. He knows what we took." Harry staggered. His scar burned violently, then flashed images in his head. Rooms of stone, firelight, a hand gripping a snake-headed wand. Voldemort standing, furious, slashing walls in rage. "He's looking through me," Harry rasped. Wednesday caught his face, forcing his gaze up to hers, her voice sharp and anchoring. "Listen, he can't control you unless you let him." Scratching against the glass. Pain ripped through his head again, and for an awful second her words blurred. He saw those red eyes through his own, felt heat and hatred surge up like seawater. And then something flicked cold from Wednesday's hand. The shard of bone glowed in its case, sending a white pulse through the air. The vision snapped away. Harry collapsed to his knees, but the pain retreated suddenly, leaving him breathing hard. "It interferes with him," Wednesday said, crouching beside him. "He hates it." Ron cursed quietly. "He knows we're going to break it, doesn't he?" "Of course," Wednesday said, "and if I were him, I'd send someone." Whatever she meant was confirmed sooner than expected. A blast of sound echoed from the direction of the Quidditch field. Screams. They ran, Harry leading now, stumbling but fast, Hermione and Ron following, Wednesday behind them, impossibly composed even while sprinting through mud and rain. Lightning flashed, revealing dark figures on the grass, cloaked, moving quick and deliberate, not Dementors, human, masked, Death Eaters. The first wave of curses struck the ground near their feet. Green fire and smoke erupted, throwing up the smell of burned air. Harry threw himself sideways, wand out. "Stupefy." Wednesday didn't crouch. She lifted one hand and drew her wand in a motion so fast it blurred. Cadir Umbra. The nearest Death Eater screamed, his shadow detached, crawling up his body like a reverse flame and swallowing his face before he could finish his curse. He dropped unconscious as his shadow returned to the ground, leaking smoke. Hermione froze for half a second. "What did you?" Wednesday already moved. "Focus. They brought 10. Harry was firing spells rapid fire. Ron stumbled but covered his flank. Hermione conjured shield barriers, flickering blue through the storm. Wednesday's magic was something else entirely, graceful violence. She didn't aim at bodies, she aimed at presence, erasing spell traces before they formed, turning shadows into blades. Each motion came with surgical precision, absence of hesitation. When one masked figure tried to curse Harry from behind, Wednesday flicked the bone shard once. It sliced the air like a scythe, splitting the curse mid-flight and reflecting it straight back. 2 fell, others hesitated. Above the chaos, Hogwarts' protective wards surged, beams of light shooting up from towers, answering the threat too late. From across the field, a familiar shrill laugh cut through the storm. "Bellatrix," Wednesday said. A tall, wild-haired witch walked from the tree line, wand spinning lazily. Harry's face hardened. "You have to stop her." "I intend to," Wednesday said, stepping forward. Bellatrix's laughter cracked the air. "Ah, the little doom girl they whispered about. You smell like grave soil. How delicious." Wednesday kept walking. "And you smell like a failed experiment." The words struck like blades. Bellatrix's grin wavered just slightly. Then spells crossed, Bellatrix sending a streak of pure red flame, Wednesday catching it with one hand and redirecting it downward, the ground exploding in a shockwave. Rain stopped for a heartbeat. Lightning illuminated them, opposites in orbit. Bellatrix screamed and unleashed another curse, jagged, echoing with insanity. Wednesday whispered one word in additive, voice lower than thunder, cease. The curse died before reaching her. Bellatrix halted mid-breath. You killed, your spell, Wednesday said evenly. Not yet you, though I could. Bellatrix's eyes widened in something like genuine fear. For a moment the whole field seemed to recognize it, the difference between inherited madness and cultivated darkness. Wednesday moved before Bellatrix could recover, striking with invisible force. Her wand barely twitched. Bellatrix was hurled backward, slammed into mud. Harry could only stare. Wednesday lowered her wand. Leave, she said. Tell your master his infestation expires soon. Bellatrix coughed blood, eyes blazing. He'll rip you apart. Wednesday's expression didn't shift. He'll try. Bellatrix vanished in a crack of displaced air, retreating. The field fell silent except for rain and distant cries where teachers were gathering students to safety. Hermione ran to Harry. Are you okay? I'm fine, he said, dizzy. She saved us. Ron wiped mud off his face. She did. I think she just humiliated Bellatrix Lestrange, permanently. Wednesday turned slowly toward them. This was just a warning. Next time he'll come himself. Harry looked at her in the dim rain. Then we finish it before that happens. Wednesday nodded once. Behind her, Dumbledore appeared out of nowhere, wand blazing, eyes like fire. He took in the scene, fallen Death Eaters, lingering magic, the sight of Wednesday Addams standing among it all untouched. Miss Addams, he said, voice something between anger and awe. What have you done? She looked at him with perfect calm. I defended your school, efficiently. He stared at her, silence heavy. The Ministry will do nothing, Wednesday said. They already fear this story, let them. Her eyes flicked to Harry, then back to Dumbledore. You told me not to proceed without counsel. I've considered counsel unreliable. She turned and walked past him, coat dragging water like a trail, her voice fading to him alone. You've raised heroes, headmaster. I prefer results. Later that night, the castle pulsed with quiet again, uneasy but alive. The storm had passed, leaving smoke and exhaustion behind. Harry sat awake in the Gryffindor common room, staring at the fire. His hand went instinctively to his forehead. The pain was less, different, muted by the relic hidden now under Wednesday's care. The serpent inside him had stirred violently today and lost. He smiled without warmth. You're afraid of her. He whispered the words to the space that wasn't empty inside his head. Good. And somewhere far away, beneath a different sky, Lord Voldemort snapped a glass in his hand, blood glistening across his knuckles, whispering one name like an oath of war. Addams. Chapter 7. The Bones of the Covenant. By morning, the castle had begun pretending nothing happened. Hogwarts always cleaned up quickly after chaos, rebuilding walls, mending wards, weaving silence over blood. Students whispered behind hands, teachers traded glances they didn't pursue, and the Ministry sent a laughably shallow statement, claiming the incident on the Quidditch pitch had been a weather anomaly. But Wednesday Addams never mistook normalcy for peace. Quiet was simply the world's way of catching its breath before the next scream. She stood at the window of the Slytherin common room, black-clad and still, watching gray dawn crawl over the lake. The reflection in the water shimmered faintly, even the shadows looked unsettled. Behind her, Pansy Parkinson muttered something about the crazy new girl and scurried away before Wednesday even turned. On the table before her sat the bone shard, the relic glowing softly through its glass case. It hadn't dimmed since the battle. If anything, it pulsed stronger, in rhythm with Harry's heartbeat half a castle away. It was ready, but the ritual that would use it was. She needed a foundation, and muddy battlefields weren't ideal for surgery meant to separate death from life. She needed neutral ground, built of her family's magic, bound directly to her bloodline. The vault had acknowledged her. Now she needed the house itself to open one more door, which meant returning. Harry found her after breakfast, halfway down the dungeon corridor, following noise like heat. Wednesday. She turned slightly, one dark braid falling against her shoulder. You need something, she said before he could speak. I need to finish this, Harry said. We can't wait anymore. Voldemort knows. Wednesday studied him. There was a new edge in his voice that caught her attention, not recklessness, but clarity. Death had looked at him last night, and instead of flinching, he'd stared back. Then we do it, she said, but you'll come to my family's house this time properly, through the gate. Hermione arrived seconds later, breathless, bookbag slung forward like a shield. You can't just disappear again. Umbridge already filed complaints to the Ministry. They'll misplace them, Wednesday said. The Ministry loves busy work. We'll be gone before they find the correct drawer. Ron staggered behind, half-dressed and clearly half-terrified. You mean we're actually going back there? Harry's parasite requires precision, Wednesday said. The vault provided tools, now we need the coordinates of ancestry. Ron groaned. I hate it when you talk like that, makes my spine itch. You're welcome, Wednesday said. That evening they left through the forest again, but this time the portal was a gate built from bone and silver root, not marble. Wednesday's family magic opened from the ground like claws uncurling around air. As the shadow crossed, the world reversed again and they were home. The Addams estate looked different on approach this time. The gate shivered when they passed, lights flickering across the stained glass windows instead of lightning. The house welcomed Harry with quiet recognition. Wednesday turned at the threshold. It knows your curse. How comforting, Ron muttered. Inside, the air smelled of candle wax and midnight. Grandmama Addams was waiting, short, ancient, bright-eyed. She looked like a living spell gone slightly wrong. Wednesday, she exclaimed cheerily. You brought snacks. Ron blinked. We're not. Is he Weasley? Grandmama interrupted. Lovely freckles, like rust, but charming. Wednesday sighed lightly. Grandmama, these are my associates. The boy carries a curse fragment. The girl doubts everything and will try to rationalize necromancy. Grandmama cooed. Adorable. Hermione froze mid-curtsy. Dinner felt less like hospitality and more like a test. Lingering spirits drifted through the dining room, plates arranged themselves. Morticia and Gomez Addams appeared at last, elegant, detached, smiling just enough to make Harry unsure if they were approving or curious whether he'd die amusingly. Morticia approached Harry first. So you're the one with the scar. Harry straightened. Yes, ma'am. Lovely piece of work, Morticia said. Tragic artistry. Gomez twirled his cigar, eyes gleaming. And my little death flower intends to cure it, eh? I trust she's told you about the consequences. Harry glanced at Wednesday. Only that I'll live. Good girl, Gomez said. She always aims high. Morticia smiled faintly and cuts deep. After dinner, they descended toward the ritual chamber. It wasn't elegant, stone floors, high ceiling, the kind of old magic that didn't care for appearances. Wednesday prepared everything herself. Salt circle chalked with bone dust, candles burning cold instead of warm, runes carved into rings on the floor like layered petals. Harry watched in silence. His scar ached just looking at it. What happens if something goes wrong? He asked finally. Wednesday didn't pause. Then it kills us both. Hermione's voice rose. Both. It'll fight being removed, Wednesday said. It might try to devour the closest magical source. That's me, you're not. Hermione shook her head. There has to be another way. There isn't, Wednesday said. He's been living half alive for 14 years. You don't patch this kind of thing, you excise it. Hermione stepped closer, voice low. You'll die. Wednesday's expression didn't change. Possibly it's irrelevant. Harry's voice cut across both. Stop, she's right, I'm done being scared of dying. If it takes your kind of dark to stop him, then fine, do it. Wednesday looked up, their eyes met, his green, her almost black, and for a moment something fragile flickered beneath all that certainty. Respect, not affection, shared exhaustion. Sit, she said finally. The ritual begins now. The curse within Harry reacted almost before the first word left her mouth. The scar burned, light gouged through his vision. Voldemort's magic recoiled like a living scream. Wednesday lowered her voice, calling ancient syllables, Spanish and Latin braided with Addams' tongue. The air thickened, vibrating. The bone of the covenant flared to life, hovering above them, white veins cracking open until pure silver light shot down into the circle. Harry gasped. His chest spasmed. The fragment fought back, pushing raw, black energy into his veins. Wednesday slammed her hand to his forehead, pressing him against the floor. Don't you dare fight me now. He didn't know if she was speaking to him or the curse. The room surged, objects lifted, stone groaned. The fragment began to manifest, shadow spilling from his scar, shape half solid, half screaming, Voldemort's voice leaking through its edges. You do not know what you touch, Wednesday smiled faintly. You'd be surprised. She thrust her other hand into the shadow. It burned instantly, skin blistered, eyes narrowing, but she didn't pull away. The bone glowed brighter. Silver cut through black. For a moment the room became light and darkness combined, colliding, no time, no space, just two forces wrestling. Harry screamed, his head felt like the world tearing at its seam. Hermione cried out, rushing forward, but Grandmama's hand clamped her shoulder. Not yet, she hissed, she's winning. And she was, slowly. Wednesday's body trembled, thin veins along her neck turning dark as the fragment's magic leached at her. Her lips moved faster, words like blades cutting air. The black mass began shrinking, from Harry's head outward, retreating under pressure. It fought, it writhed, it screamed. You think death obeys you, she said, voice almost gentle. It never did. Then she drove the bone shard straight into Harry's scar. The shockwave hit like thunder, every light in the hall bursting white. The smell of ozone and dust filled the air. Silence, and then without ceremony Harry collapsed completely. When he opened his eyes, time had changed. The air was clean, quiet. His head didn't buzz, his body didn't hum with pain. No whispers, no residue, just him. The scar still marked his skin, but it was flat now, pale and cold, no pulse beneath it. He sat up slowly. Hermione was crying. Ron was grinning shakily through tears. And Wednesday was lying on the floor a few feet away, unconscious, hands still gripping the shard. The relic had cracked beyond repair. Her skin was pale, her pulse faint but steady. Harry crawled to her side, shaking. Hey, wake up. She didn't, but her lips twitched, an almost imperceptible smile. Still alive, Grandmama said, examining her. Barely so romantic. Morticia spoke softly behind her. She'll recover. Addams always do. Death doesn't like losing to them. Harry exhaled dizzy, staring down at her. For a moment the room looked surreal, glowing just faintly where her magic still clung to stone. It's gone, he murmured. Ron nodded, wiping his eyes. Mate, I think she actually did it. No scar pain. No shadow voices, just silence, clean and terrifying because it meant freedom. Hermione knelt beside him. We have to get her back to Hogwarts. Grandmama waved a hand. She'll wake when ready. The girl built herself from rituals and sarcasm. This is just another nap. Harry almost laughed, but his throat tightened instead. He touched her hand gently, skin cold but alive, and whispered, "Thank you." Wednesday woke hours later in her own room. Shadows gathered like pets along the corners. Morticia was beside her, brushing invisible dust from her wrist. "You did well," her mother said quietly. "The boy lives. He should," Wednesday said, voice hoarse. "I dislike unfinished business." "You nearly killed yourself." Wednesday's answer was simple. It was statistically interesting. Morticia smiled faintly, proud and resigned. "He reminds me of your father, always courting disaster politely." Wednesday looked at the ceiling. Disaster dressed better. Harry returned to Hogwarts with Hermione and Ron the next day, escorted by Dumbledore himself, who had come to collect them once reports reached the Ministry that the Addams estate had resonated enough energy to reboot Scotland's weather for 12 hours. Dumbledore said nothing on the way back. The man who had always spoken too much only watched Harry quietly, as if reevaluating a 16-year-old he'd thought he already understood. When they reached the entrance arch, Dumbledore finally spoke. "I assume Miss Addams accomplished what she intended." Harry met his gaze. "Yes, it's gone." "And yet," Dumbledore said softly, "I fear the ripples of her work will echo further than she expects." Harry's tone was calm, hard. "Then I hope they echo loudly." Dumbledore studied him and nodded. Wednesday stayed behind at the estate for 2 days, recovering. When she finally returned to Hogwarts, she looked unchanged, except for her eyes. They had always been dark. Now they were darker, polished toward something endless. The bone shard hung as a necklace around her throat, no longer glowing but faintly humming. Harry found her near the astronomy tower that evening, the wind heavy and quiet between them. "It's over," he said. "Not yet," she replied. "The parasite's gone, but Voldemort felt it die. He'll come." "Let him. You're improving," she said. He smiled. "You haven't changed." "I rarely do," she said. "That's why everyone else does." They stood together in silence, wind curling around them. Somewhere far below, the lake shimmered black, lightning coiled beneath its surface. The serpent had stirred, and the pain that once connected them was gone. All that remained now was the war, and a boy without a curse. Standing beside the girl who broke it. Chapter 8. Trial by fire. For 2 weeks after Wednesday and Harry returned to Hogwarts, the castle behaved like something pretending not to bleed. Classes resumed, laughter filtered through corridors again, and Umbridge insisted the recent outbursts of unruly magic were resolved. But anyone who'd seen the flash of light over the forbidden forest that night knew otherwise. The students whispered it quietly now, that the Addams girl had fought death and won. Harry was different too. He no longer woke with nightmares. His scar had stopped burning. Even his magic felt cleaner, sharper, as if the constant static of Voldemort's presence had finally gone quiet inside him. But quiet didn't mean safe. Wednesday could feel the pressure brewing behind the silence, Ministry interference, Dumbledore's watchful hesitation, and Voldemort's gathering wrath like thunder somewhere beyond horizon. When things survive death, they always attract its attention. The first crack appeared in the form of a letter, delivered by Ministry Owl, sealed in pink wax so thick it smelled of anxiety and law. Harry opened it at breakfast, every word dripping bureaucracy. Hogwarts will host a formal tribunal to investigate recent incidents involving unauthorized magical practices. Attendance of all parties involved is mandatory. Ron groaned. "You've got to be joking." "A tribunal," Hermione's face drained. "It's an internal ministry hearing. Dumbledore must have been forced to accept it." Umbridge finally got the backing she wanted. Wednesday poured black tea while reading the accompanying page. "They call it an inquiry, I call it theater." Harry glanced toward her. They're after you. Of course they are, Wednesday said. They'll think my actions endangered students. They'll want an admission of guilt. It'll make them feel competent. Are you just going to sit there? Ron asked. Yes, Wednesday said. Until the day of the tribunal, then I'll stand. The hearing was scheduled in the Great Hall, identical to the last, except this time the banner above the teacher's table read, Ministry Oversight Committee Educational Wing. Hermione whispered, That's not education, that's a witch hunt. Wednesday gave her a look that was almost gentle. Then we let them hunt. Rows of students filled the benches by noon, murmuring quietly. Umbridge looked triumphant, flanked by 2 ministry officials in polished robes, one skeletal man with gleaming spectacles and one bored-looking witch taking notes. Dumbledore sat at the opposite end of the table, unreadable. His hands folded like patience itself. Wednesday stood alone before them, hair braided, uniform perfect, face calm. Harry sat near the front, jaw set tight. Hermione beside him, Ron close enough to curse someone if things turned ugly. Umbridge's voice hovered sweetly over the microphones of magic amplifiers spread along the hall. Miss Addams, we have reviewed multiple accounts of your extracurricular activities. Unauthorized ritual use, forbidden defensive magic. You caused property damage, endangered students, and invoked spells not recognized by the British Wizarding Code. That's accurate, Wednesday said. The hall fell silent at her tone, serene and unflinching. Umbridge blinked. You admit, I confess competence, Wednesday said, tilting her head. It's an unfortunate rarity here. The skeletal official leaned forward, voice dry. Miss Addams, this committee seeks to determine whether your methods are to be tolerated. Your actions skirted the boundaries of legal magic. Your boundaries are drawn in ignorance, Wednesday said sharply. Dark magic isn't born evil, it's a tool. You left a child with a parasite of death lodged in his skull for 14 years because your morality didn't know what to do with it. I did. Dumbledore's eyes flicked toward her. The faintest flicker of something like remorse crossed his face. Umbridge rose abruptly, crimson cheeks trembling. That parasite, that curse, is pure conjecture, and if it existed, it was not your place. Wednesday interrupted her with a tone so low the nearest candles bent inward. You tortured students with cursed quills and called it punishment. You ignored Harry Potter's agony because proper paperwork hadn't cleared your desk. Your place is nowhere near righteousness. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few Slytherins actually applauded, quickly silenced by Snape's glare. Umbridge's voice wobbled. You threaten ministry authority. No, Wednesday said. I expose ministry hypocrisy. The bored witch beside Umbridge scribbled frantically now, murmuring to her colleague, who suddenly looked less confident. Harry clenched his fists under the table. Hermione's whisper came like wind. She's dismantling every one of their arguments. Wednesday continued, her tone measured like a scalpel's edge. If you expel me, you admit negligence in protecting the boy who lived. If you sanction my methods, you legitimize darkness as necessary correction. Either way, I win. The murmurs swelled, the spectacle cracked into chaos until Dumbledore finally stood, raising his wand, commanding silence. Enough. The word echoed like a command written in spellwork. This tribunal, he said quietly, was never meant to punish heroism. His gaze found Wednesday. I will remind the committee, Hogwarts endured an assault. Miss Addams defended it, efficiently. Umbridge sputtered. But efficiency with darkness. Dumbledore's tone sharpened. Darkness does not concern me when wielded for protection, nor should it concern you. He turned toward the ministry officials. The inquiry is concluded. Hogwarts will not expel Miss Addams. The hall erupted, half in outrage, half in relief. Umbridge's face turned a deeper shade of pink, one step below purple. Wednesday inclined her head to Dumbledore. I appreciate your belated accuracy. He met her gaze. And I appreciate that you remind us competence looks many ways. That night, the shockwaves of the tribunal ran through the school like wind through pipes. The ministry would rage, but Hogwarts had drawn its line: protect the castle, protect the children, even if the protector frightens you. Harry found Wednesday at the lake after curfew. Moonlight dripped across the surface like mercury. The breeze smelled faintly metallic, charged with storm memory. Dumbledore saved you, he said. No, Wednesday said quietly. He saved himself. Expelling me would validate everything I said. Harry smirked bitterly. You really don't have any fear, do you? I have one, Wednesday said, that I'll grow bored before the war ends. Harry looked at her. You won't. In London, far beneath the ministry, Voldemort listened to Bellatrix's trembling report. His rage simmered, quiet now, lethal calm replacing chaos. She's dark, my lord, Bellatrix whispered. Older magic, it made my curses vanish. Voldemort's fingers tapped his armrest. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost admiring. Addams' magic, I read of them once, the family that danced with death and came back unbroken. She took it from me, my lord, the peace. I know, he said, rising. I felt it die. He turned toward the shadow pooling near the base of his throne, Nagini's outline writhing faintly. If she can unmake what I built, she deserves my attention. Bellatrix kneeled lower, trembling. You'll destroy her. Voldemort's lips curled. Number I'll watch. Then choose when to strike. Hogwarts noticed the change subtly at first. The lake's water grew colder. The staircases whispered more than they creaked. And Wednesday's reflection in the tower mirrors seemed to move infinitesimally slower than she did, as if reality was playing catch-up. Harry felt it too. The peace after the ritual wasn't peace anymore, it was pressure. Each spell he cast glimmered faintly with residual bone light. The scar's residue had imprinted his magic itself. The more he fought, the more it grew sharper, focused. Maybe it's her influence, Hermione whispered one night. Working with her changed your magic structure, her rituals reached through yours. They're binding. Harry thought about that long after she stopped talking. Binding, sure, maybe that's what friendship was between people like them. Whatever fragile thing held two weapons from cutting each other too soon. Umbridge didn't retreat quietly. The tribunal's failure had embarrassed her, but humiliation only made her crueler. Within days, she issued a new decree. All experimental magic must be reported directly to the Ministry. Violators will be detained for questioning. Wednesday read it once, then crumpled the parchment neatly and left it pressed to Umbridge's doorknob, folded into the shape of a skull. By morning, the decree had vanished. Rumor said the paper screamed at midnight. Even Dumbledore avoided commenting. The climax of this chapter came, as it always did, with fire. Friday evening, half the castle saw smoke curling above the divination tower. Somebody had sabotaged its upper wards. Fawkes screamed above the hall. Alarms rang. Wednesday sprinted ahead of everyone else, instinct lighting her path. Harry followed, wand ready. The flames weren't natural, green and silver, growing backward through the walls, not spreading, searching. It's message magic, Wednesday said immediately, scanning. Voldemort style, he's marking territory. Here, what? Sudden hiss echoed across the corridor, serpentine, metallic, wrong. The flames twisted into the shape of a serpent, thrashing midair, then imploded into a single molten rune that burned itself against the floor. Crude lettering, single word in ash-black runes, ADDAMS. Wednesday bent down, finger tracing it through heat. The word pulsed like a heartbeat. Trial by fire, she murmured. Harry glanced around, heart pounding. What does it mean? It means he's done watching, Wednesday said softly. Now he's dared me to respond. Later that night, Dumbledore summoned her privately, his face carved in the dim glow of his office, eyes older than she'd seen yet. He's reaching through the mark, I know, she said. You've taunted him, Dumbledore said. He'll come for you. That's the idea, Wednesday said. The piece inside Harry tied him to the boy. Destroying it severed him and left him exposed. Dumbledore's fingers tightened on the chair. He is unpredictable. You're powerful, but you are not immune. She tilted her head, smiling faintly. Maybe not, but I'm interesting. Death likes interesting. The next morning, the ash rune on the floor had cooled to obsidian, but it never faded. Students stepped around it as though it were disease. Teachers averted their eyes. Wednesday stood over it a long time, watched its faint shimmer. Harry came up beside her. We'll face him, he said. We won't wait for him, she replied. Ron sighed from behind them. Can't we have 1 week without doom? Hermione muttered, with you lot, no chance. Wednesday's gaze never left the rune. Doom follows competence, she said, and I'm very competent. Outside, spring winds screamed off the lake, sharp and alive. The forest whispered to itself, like something remembering a warning too late. Inside Hogwarts, a serpent's mark burned quietly, promising reckoning. And somewhere beyond, in the ruins of his own failed immortality, Voldemort whispered her name again, not in hatred this time, but in curiosity that sounded dangerously like fear. Chapter 9, The Battle of the Black Lake. The night the lake went silent, Hogwarts forgot how to breathe. Wind stopped at the edge of the shore. The surface turned to glass, mirror-still, seamless. Luna Lovegood was the first to notice, perched on the dock with her legs in the water. When she stared down, her reflection winked at her, though she hadn't moved. By the time she ran inside to warn the others, the water had begun to pulse, slow, rhythmic, like something enormous waking underneath. Harry met Wednesday on the 5th-floor balcony minutes later. She was watching the lake, as usual, hands behind her back, braid unmoving even as thunder rolled. It's him, Harry said breathlessly. Isn't it? Wednesday's voice was quiet. Partially, Voldemort doesn't test waters without purpose. He's under the surface. Under, Hermione arrived, clutching her notes so tightly they crinkled. What does he want? He wanted his fragment back. He couldn't have it. Now he wants validation. Ron shuddered. Validation for what? Killing us. Wednesday turned slowly. Validation that he still feared. He'll send more than serpents tonight. Lightning flashed, and with it cracks in the mirror lake, light spilling through like veins opening. Shapes stirred beneath, black against blue. Wednesday stepped forward, hair blowing like ink in wind. Tell Dumbledore to rally the defense units. This will not be contained. Harry clenched his wand. We're going down there. Wednesday didn't argue, of course. By the time they reached the shore, the battle had begun. Death Eaters emerged through rippling water, wands gleaming, cloaks plastered to skin. Spells lit the grass, scattering silver fire across rain. From the castle's towers, defensive wards flared. Teachers rushed toward the lake even as students fled inward. McGonagall's voice cracked through the storm. Form lines, keep the younger ones behind shields, then darkness burst upward. From the center of the lake, a column of shadow spiraled, splitting through the clouds, followed by the hiss everyone knew but hoped never to hear. Nagini, enlarged beyond natural scale, coiled half-shadow, half-flesh, a serpent of magic-given form. Her eyes gleamed green with borrowed intelligence. Wednesday stopped moving, gaze fixed upward. He's testing resurrection techniques. Fascinating, Harry aimed his wand, voice hoarse. It's not fascinating, that's her. Exactly, Wednesday said, stepping forward. She follows him, killing her disrupts his tether. Ron muttered, we're not killing anything that size. You're safe behind me, Wednesday said casually. If she eats me, run. Wednesday raised her wand, murmuring a phrase that vibrated the water itself, words meant to bend rather than break. The serpent turned toward her, scales shimmering under lightning. Addams, it hissed, almost human. You remember my name, Wednesday said. Good manners. It lunged. Her wand cut sideways through air, and the lake answered. The water beneath Nagini shivered, rising in jagged shapes, freezing mid-motion as magic locked it solid. The serpent collided into jagged ice, shrieking rage. Freeze spell layered with kinetic reversal, Hermione shouted, eyes wide. She trapped physical momentum. Dark cryomancy, Snape's voice barked somewhere from the field, sounding almost impressed. Don't touch it. Wednesday didn't hesitate. She advanced, 1 foot at a time over the trembling ice, wand extended, voice calm as apocalypse. You are not welcome here. Serve your master elsewhere. The serpent twisted again, breaking ice. Water exploded upward, throwing debris and rain. Harry darted forward, firing counter-curses, red and blue light flashing against green scale. Nagini hissed, loud enough to shake the air. Lightning struck the lake's surface, turning reflection into molten silver. For a moment everything went soundless, fight offset by pure energy. Then from the shadows behind the serpent, human figures appeared, dozens, masks gleaming wet, Death Eaters advancing in formation. Wednesday whispered, predictable, and turned her wand toward the ground. The silver bone pendant around her neck shimmered once, activating remnants of the ancient relic she'd worn since the ritual. She whispered a word that sounded like a heartbeat cracking open. Umbra, the world blurred. Shadows rose from the ground in waves, each forming roughly human silhouettes mimicking the attackers, copies birthed from absence. The first collided, the second seized. The field became chaos, death fighting mirror death. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stared in disbelief as phantom constructs tore through the ranks with eerie precision. Professor Flitwick's voice echoed from the tower. Merlin's beard, what spell is that? Addams' family shadow weaving, Snape answered, tone dry even while dueling. Extremely illegal, but effective. Lightning flared again, the serpent broke free, lunging toward Wednesday with a screech that could shatter glass. Harry acted without hesitation, sectum sempra. The spell tore through the creature's flank, shadow blood splattered across the ice, sizzling. The serpent flailed, half magic, half body losing form. For a moment Harry saw something he never expected, fear, animal fear in its eyes. Then Wednesday's wand sliced forward faster than thought. Restare. The serpent's body froze mid-motion, suspended and collapsed sideways into water. Rain hissed. Silence stretched across the lake. Wednesday lowered her wand, breathing steady though her hands trembled faintly, an Addams symptom of power overload, not fear. Harry glanced at her, chest heaving. Did we just— Yes, Wednesday said, scanning the horizon, which means he's angry. As if cued by her remark, the rain stopped instantly. A voice spoke, echoing from every direction, deep, smooth, cruelly composed, impressive. Harry's blood went cold. He's here. You used death as weapon against me, the voice hissed. You turned what should obey into rebellion. Wednesday turned toward the sky. You misunderstand, Voldemort. Death doesn't obey anyone, not me, not you. The clouds parted. For the first time in 15 years, Voldemort appeared on Hogwarts grounds, stepping from roiling shadow at the far shore, pale, thin, eyes burning red. Every wand turned toward him. Dumbledore moved forward through smoke and fire, Fawkes circling overhead. This wasn't a war, not yet. This was a confrontation written in prophecy and defiance. The air thickened, power hums collided, Dumbledore's wand flared gold, Voldemort lifted his hand, the ground shuddered, the lake steamed. Harry stood beside Wednesday, their combined magic hummed strange and harmonious, his scar gone, her relic alive. He's weakened, Wednesday whispered. The Horcrux lost destabilized his link to mortality, he's using revived shadows to enhance himself. Can we beat him? Harry asked. She smiled faintly. We possibly, you alone, never. Lightning cracked above them again, splitting sky and sound. Voldemort's wand descended. Avada Kedavra, Wednesday finished for him. Green light raced from both sides, but hers wasn't a killing curse, it was its reflection. The Addams technique wasn't resistance, it was absorption. Her spell ate his. Like ink thrown into black water, his curse vanished into hers. Light imploded at the midpoint, sucked inward. The air went silent. Even Voldemort blinked, instinctively stepping back. What? Wednesday stepped forward, eyes black, voice calm. Do try something else. Fawkes screamed overhead, fire bursting in his wake. Dumbledore took the moment, sending arcs of light shooting toward Voldemort's wand. The impact shook the ground, half the water boiled, half froze. Students watching from the windows saw history fracture, spells crossing faster than lightning, bending dimension itself as Wednesday pressed forward, each motion deliberate while Harry backed her flank. Voldemort's fury became desperation, his curses turning wild, unstable, and with every burst she met him, deflecting, cutting off resonance, dissecting his rhythm with assassin precision. This wasn't just defense anymore, it was autopsy. When the final curse broke, fire erupted upward, not from wand but from the lake. Black flame. Voldemort staggered back, cloak ripping against conjured heat. Dumbledore's voice echoed from the tower, commanding retreat. Teachers began herding students back, but Wednesday didn't move. She faced him across cracked ice, steady and unafraid. You built yourself from fragments, she said. Now you see what happens when someone smarter starts collecting them. Voldemort hissed, trembling with rage and something else, suspicion that felt too close to fear. You think you can erase me? I think I already started, Wednesday said. Lightning flashed between them, green against silver, one final glare before he vanished into smoke. After the battle, Hogwarts stood tense, trembling. Lake smoked quietly, half-boiled, half-frozen, waves lapping like whispers. Students and faculty moved through ruins of spells, cleaning. Snape carried potions, McGonagall set healing wards, even ghosts drifted anxiously. Harry sat on the dock hours later, wrapped in a cloak, staring at the rippled water that had tried to consume them all. Wednesday joined him silently, sitting close enough that he could feel her cold steadiness beside him. Is he gone for good? Harry asked. No, Wednesday said calmly. But he's gone long enough to panic. That's something. It is, she said. Fear destabilizes him more effectively than hope. Harry exhaled. Would it be crazy if I said I'm glad you came here? No, Wednesday said. It would be obvious. A quiet smile touched his mouth. You're impossible. So I'm told, Wednesday said softly. In the headmaster's office, Dumbledore stood circling a map glowing faint green, showing echoes from the battle. Snape watched him silently, expression unreadable. She's not from our system, Snape said eventually. Her power bends Hogwarts wards, she disrupts everything. Dumbledore's gaze rested on the shadowed outline of the lake. And yet, Severus, tonight you saw the beginning of Voldemort's undoing. Not by prophecy or Potter's sacrifice, by will. Snape's eyes narrowed. Addams will not follow your rules. She doesn't have to, Dumbledore said, faintly smiling. She follows results. In the quiet that followed, Wednesday Addams remained by the lake with Harry until sunrise. The water reflected neither stars nor sky, only black under black, waiting. She looked down at her own reflection, which for the first time since arriving at Hogwarts looked exactly like her. No hesitations, no differences, just shadow and calm acceptance. The serpent had died. The master had fled, the battlefield still smelled of fear. And darkness finally recognized her not as intruder but as equal. Chapter 10, The Dark Before. Chapter 10, The Dark Before. 3 days passed without incident. That was the part that frightened everyone most. Hogwarts healed itself the way it always did, stone knitting back together, scorch marks fading, the lake settling to its usual dark shimmer. But beneath the repair something lingered. The wards hummed at a different pitch now, tuned sharper, as if the castle had tasted real war and decided to stay armed. Students moved through corridors in clusters, talking louder than necessary. Laughter came in bursts, brittle and too fast. The younger years clung to prefects, the older ones pretended they weren't doing the same. Quidditch was suspended, Hogsmeade visits cancelled. The Daily Prophet ran a front-page headline that managed to say everything and nothing. Disturbance at Hogwarts. Ministry ASSURES public of full control. Wednesday read it over breakfast and set it down without comment. Full control. As if anyone in the ministry could control a single thing happening inside these walls. Harry sat across from her at the Gryffindor table, a small but visible act of defiance. A Slytherin and a Gryffindor sharing bread. Half the hall stared. Neither of them cared. You're not eating, Hermione said, sliding toast toward him. Not hungry, Harry said. His eyes were on the enchanted ceiling, where clouds moved too fast, as though the sky itself was restless. You should eat, Wednesday said from behind her teacup. Starvation is only romantic in novels. In practice, it makes you slow. Harry smirked faintly. Is that concern tactical advice? She corrected. If Voldemort returns, I need you functional, not decorative. Ron snorted into his pumpkin juice. She's got a point, mate. Harry picked up the toast. He ate it without tasting it, but he ate. That was enough. The quiet stretched into afternoon. Wednesday spent the hours in the library, not the restricted section this time, but the mundane stacks, reading histories of Hogwarts' previous sieges. The castle had been attacked 7 times in its existence. It had fallen once briefly during the Goblin Rebellion of 1612 and recovered within a week. The walls had memory. They'd survived worse than Voldemort, but Voldemort wasn't trying to conquer Hogwarts. He was trying to prove a point, and wounded pride made men more dangerous than ambition ever could. She closed the book and stared at the window where afternoon light fell in pale sheets across the table. For the first time in weeks, she had nothing to prepare. The Horcrux was gone. The bone relic had served its purpose. Her magic was recovering slowly. The ritual had cost her more than she'd admitted to anyone, drawing reserves she'd need time to rebuild. She flexed her hand. The blisters from gripping Voldemort's soul fragment had healed, but the skin beneath remained tender. A reminder that even Addams' flesh had limits. Footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. You've been sitting there for 2 hours, Hermione said, appearing at the edge of the table with an armful of books and an expression of determined normalcy. That's my thing. I'm expanding my repertoire, Wednesday said. Hermione sat down across from her, setting her stack between them like a barricade. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Hermione's voice dropped low, careful. Are you all right? Wednesday looked at her. The question was so simple it almost hurt. Nobody had asked her that, not the teachers, not Dumbledore, not even Harry. They'd all been so focused on what she could do that they'd forgotten she was also someone who'd done it. I'm adequate, Wednesday said. That's not what I asked. Wednesday's jaw tightened just barely. I used more magic in the ritual than I've used in my entire life combined. The battle at the lake drained what was left. My body is recovering. My mind is sharp. My emotions are, she paused, irrelevant. Hermione studied her with that particular Granger intensity, the look of someone who read between lines for sport. You nearly died removing that Horcrux, and then you fought Voldemort 3 days later. That's not irrelevant, that's insane. Insanity runs in my family, Wednesday said. We've made peace with it. I'm serious. So am I. Wednesday's expression shifted, not softening exactly, but losing its sharpest edge. Granger, I appreciate the concern, truly, but I didn't come to Hogwarts to be cared for. I came because something was wrong and nobody was fixing it. Hermione was quiet for a long moment, then she said, You know, you remind me of Harry. He does the same thing, carries everything alone, and pretends it doesn't weigh anything. The difference, Wednesday said, is that Harry pretends because he doesn't want to burden others. I pretend because I genuinely find vulnerability inefficient. Hermione almost laughed, almost. You're impossible. Second time I've heard that this week, Wednesday murmured, returning to her book. I must be doing something right. Evening came slow and golden, the kind of light that made the castle look like something from a painting, beautiful and already lost. Harry found Wednesday on the astronomy tower, which had become their unofficial meeting ground. A place where the sky was close enough to touch and the ground far enough away to forget. She stood at the railing, looking out over the forbidden forest. The trees moved in patterns that weren't quite wind. He's gathering, she said as Harry approached. How do you know? The forest tells me. Trees communicate through root systems, magical ones through resonance. Something large is moving through the northern woods, not creatures, intention. Harry leaned against the railing beside her. How long? Days, maybe less. He nodded slowly, accepting this the way soldiers accept weather. It would come, they'd face it. For a while they stood in shared silence, the comfortable kind earned through crisis. Below them the lake reflected the first stars, and somewhere a bird sang its evening call. Can I ask you something? Harry said. You're going to regardless. He smiled. Why did you really come here, to Hogwarts? Your family didn't make you. Dumbledore's invitation was just politics. You could have stayed home. Wednesday was quiet for several heartbeats. When she spoke, her voice carried something Harry had never heard in it before, not vulnerability, but honesty stripped of performance. Because I was bored, she said, then quieter, and because I read about you. Harry blinked. About me, the boy who lived, the child marked by death and kept alive by love. Every magical publication treats your story like a fairy tale, tragedy wrapped in triumph, destiny dressed in scar tissue. She paused. I don't believe in fairy tales. But I believe in unfair burdens, and when I read between the lines, I saw a boy nobody was actually helping. The wind moved between them, carrying the smell of rain and pine. My family understands darkness, she continued. We live in it, we celebrate it, not because we're evil, but because we refuse to pretend it doesn't exist. The wizarding world fears darkness so completely that they couldn't even name what was living inside you. They called it a scar, a connection, a remnant. Anything but what it was, a crime committed against a baby, left unaddressed for 14 years because addressing it required magic that made polite people uncomfortable. Harry's throat tightened. He'd heard versions of this before, from Hermione's gentle outrage, from Ron's fierce loyalty, from Sirius's bitter wisdom. But Wednesday said it differently, without comfort, without softening. Just the raw, surgical truth delivered by someone who'd walked into a stranger's war and picked up a scalpel. "I came because someone should have come years ago," she said, "and because the Addams family doesn't wait for invitations when something needs killing." Harry looked at her, really looked. Dark eyes, sharp jaw, hands scarred from ritual fire. She was the strangest ally he'd ever had and the most honest. "Thank you," he said, "for not lying to me." "I don't lie," Wednesday said. "It's a waste of language. Everyone lies. Everyone else," she corrected. "I simply choose which truths to withhold." A laugh escaped him, genuine, unexpected, warming the cold air between them. Wednesday's expression didn't change, but something in her posture eased, as if his laughter was a sound she hadn't known she needed to hear. "When this is over," Harry said, "what happens to you?" "I go home," she said simply. "Hogwarts was never permanent. And us?" The question hung in the air. Wednesday turned to face him, and for one unguarded moment, he saw past the armor, past the darkness, the name, the centuries of cultivated indifference, to the girl underneath who had bled for a stranger because it was right. "You'll survive," she said. "That was always the point." "That's not what I meant." She held his gaze. "I know." The silence that followed said everything words couldn't. Not romance, something older, stranger, built from shared battles and the particular intimacy of having seen each other's worst fears up close. Wednesday looked away first. "We should sleep. Tomorrow may be the last quiet day we get." Harry nodded. "Good night, Wednesday." "Good night, Harry." He turned to leave, then stopped. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you were bored." The faintest curve touched her lips. "So am I." In the dungeons, Snape sat alone in his office, staring at a photograph he kept hidden in the false bottom of his desk drawer. Lily Evans, 17, laughing at something off camera. The colors had faded, but her eyes were still impossibly green. He'd watched Wednesday Addams tear a piece of Voldemort's soul from Lily's son. He'd stood at the edge of the battlefield and seen Potter fight without the parasite's weight for the first time in his life, clear, focused, free. Snape had done nothing to help. That was the truth he carried like broken glass in his chest. For all his double agency, his sacrifices, his years of penance, he had never once tried to remove the thing that was slowly killing the boy. Because Dumbledore had asked him not to, because the plan required it, because the greater good demanded patience. And then a 15-year-old girl walked in, diagnosed the problem in a week, and solved it in a month, not because she loved Harry, not because prophecy demanded it, because she found it offensive. He looked at the photograph again, Lily's eyes. He made a decision. Rising, he crossed to his cabinet and pulled out 3 vials, essence of dittany, concentrated, phoenix tears, distilled, and something older, a potion he'd brewed in secret years ago, designed to stabilize magical cores during extreme trauma. He'd made it for Lily once when he still believed he could save her. He'd never had cause to use it until now. He placed the vials in a case, sealed it, and carried it through silent corridors to the room of requirement. He knew Wednesday would come here eventually. She'd been using the room for preparations all week, its door appearing only when she approached. He set the case inside the threshold with a note in his angular script for the procedure. "These will keep him alive if your methods falter. Do not thank me. Do not mention this. SSPS." Her eyes were green too. Then he turned and walked away, robes sweeping stone, expression locked. If Lily's son was going to war, the least Snape could do was ensure the girl fighting beside him had every tool she needed. Wednesday found the case at midnight. She read the note twice, expression unreadable. Then she pocketed the vials and burned the paper, but she kept the postscript in memory. Filed it alongside everything else she'd learned about Severus Snape, the most complicated man in a castle full of complications. "Green eyes," she murmured to the dark, "always green." The next morning dawned gray and heavy. The castle felt taut, like a bow drawn back, waiting to release. Harry woke early, dressed in silence, and found Ron already up, which was unprecedented enough to qualify as an omen. "Couldn't sleep," Ron said, pulling on his shoes. "Kept dreaming about snakes." "Welcome to my life," Harry said dryly. "For the last 5 years." Ron grinned weakly. "How'd you stand it?" "I didn't," Harry said honestly. "Not really. I just kept walking forward because the alternative was standing still, and standing still meant drowning." Ron looked at him, a long, searching look. "You're different, you know, since she removed it." "Different how?" "Clearer, like someone wiped fog off a window." Ron paused. "I was scared of her at first. Addams, I mean. Terrified, honestly, but watching her, she's not evil. She's just honest in a way that makes everyone else look like liars." Harry nodded slowly. "That's exactly what she is." They walked down to breakfast together, and the great hall was quieter than usual. Professors exchanged glances over coffee. Even Dumbledore's seat was empty, a rare absence that made the room feel off balance. Wednesday appeared at the Slytherin table, composed as ever. She caught Harry's eye across the room and held up one finger. One day he understood. That afternoon, Dumbledore called a staff meeting. Students weren't invited, but Fred and George had long ago charmed an extendable ear into the walls of the conference chamber. Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Wednesday gathered in the corridor outside, listening. Dumbledore's voice came through thin but clear. The wards detected coordinated apparition signatures in the forest boundary last night, at least 40, possibly more. McGonagall's sharp intake of breath, 40 Death Eaters, and other entities, Dementors, possibly giants. Dumbledore's tone was grave. Tom is marshalling everything. Snape spoke next, flat and cold. He's unraveling. The Horcrux's destruction has made him unstable. He's acting from fear, not strategy. Fear makes him more dangerous, Dumbledore said, not less. Silence. Then Flitwick's voice, small but steady. What do? We prepare, Dumbledore said. Every ward strengthened, every passage sealed, every student who can fight trained, and those who cannot, his voice caught almost imperceptibly, protected. Wednesday pulled back from the wall. She'd heard enough. Tomorrow night, she said quietly. That's when he comes. Harry's jaw tightened. How do you know it's tomorrow? Because tonight is the last night before the new moon, Wednesday said. Darkest night of the cycle. His magic peaks when light is absent. She met each of their eyes in turn. Prepare everything. Rest while you can. Tomorrow we end this. She walked away down the corridor, coat trailing behind her, and for a moment, just a moment, the shadows along the walls bent toward her like flowers following the sun. Except Wednesday Addams wasn't the sun, she was the eclipse, and the darkness that followed her wasn't afraid, it was ready. That night, for the last time, Hogwarts was quiet, truly quiet. Harry lay in bed, eyes open, staring at the canopy. No visions, no pain. Just the steady beat of his own heart, unshared, uncompromised. His completely, for the first time in his life. He thought about everything Wednesday had given him. Not friendship exactly, something harder and more durable. The truth, the willingness to act when everyone else debated. The understanding that darkness wasn't the enemy, cowardice was. Tomorrow Voldemort would come, and for the first time Harry would face him whole. He closed his eyes. Sleep came easy, dreamless, deep and clean. Across the castle, in the deepest dungeon, Wednesday Addams sat cross-legged on her bed, Snape's vials arranged before her, the bone pendant humming against her chest. She closed her eyes and listened to the castle breathe. One more night, she whispered to the dark whispered back. Not with words, but with patience, the kind that comes from knowing the morning will bring fire and being perfectly content to walk into it. Chapter 11. The unmaking dawn broke unevenly the next morning, as if sunlight itself hesitated to cross Hogwarts' boundaries. The sky above the towers burned dull silver, neither day nor night, a color that meant transition. Wednesday Addams watched it from the battlements outside the astronomy tower, her black coat clasped tight against wind that smelled of rain and ash. She looked exhausted, but alive in the particular way that only comes before confrontation. Behind her, footsteps climbed, the familiar rhythm that had become almost an echo of her own. Harry, you haven't slept, he said. I make a habit of avoiding dramatics, Wednesday said. If I sleep now, fate will think I'm stalling. Harry studied her face, same calm stare, same merciless poise, but her hands, those precise hands always steady, trembled faintly against the stone. She noticed his gaze and smiled, faint. Residual effects, she said. Magic backlash from ritual exposure. Nothing fatal. I wasn't worried about fatal, Harry said. I was worried it might slow you down. Wednesday's eyes flicked toward him. How unusually considerate. Don't get used to it, Harry said. Battle brings out my sentimental side. For a long moment they just stood there, two silhouettes against a horizon swelling with clouds. Wind hissed through the cracks in the tower rail. Below, Hogwarts was moving. Teachers gathering in the Great Hall, students hustled underground toward safeguard tunnels disguised as storage cellars. The castle's wards vibrated audibly, the hum of ancient magic flexing like muscle. The defenders were few, but they had her. By mid-morning, Dumbledore's command center in the Great Hall had taken on the strange calm of a storm's eye. McGonagall hovered near maps of the grounds, grim and sharp. Snape merely stood apart, arms crossed. Flitwick arranged defensive runes, Hagrid paced, muttering to himself about let and beasts loose if need be. And Wednesday, seated at the end of the table beside Harry, looked, as always, like the only person not pretending calm. This isn't just another assault, she said, voice cutting through noise. His presence alone warps the wards. When he breaches the barrier, the castle will forget what side it's on. Dumbledore nodded slowly. We have contingencies. She met his gaze. Contingencies are what people invent when competence fails. Snape looked almost amused, dark eyes flicking toward Dumbledore. She has a point. Dumbledore's tone turned thin. Miss Addams, your disdain for collective strategy is noted, yet even you will need allies today. I have allies, she said, glancing sidewise toward Harry, and one competent observer. She meant Snape. McGonagall slammed her quill down. Enough, are we planning or flirting? Harry nearly choked. Wednesday didn't blink. Planning, she said. Flirting requires interest. Ron muffled a laugh behind his sleeve. Hermione glared at him for bad timing. The first sign of Voldemort's arrival came just past noon. The forest darkened, as if the trees themselves were holding breath, and then the wave hit. Air pressure crushed downward, rippling across the ground till the grass bent flat. Outside the eastern wall, shadows gathered into ranks. Shapes formed, Death Eaters, Dementors, twisted magical constructs born of failed regeneration. And at their center, Lord Voldemort. He didn't hide in smoke this time. He walked calmly through his army, robes dragging across dead earth, wand raised slightly as if waving to old friends. Above them, clouds rolled into spiral formation, lightning crawling their edges but never striking. He stopped before the ward line. So this is Hogwarts now, house of liars, cradle of traitors. His voice carried unnaturally, deep and clear. The ward shimmered, answering the intrusion. Wednesday stepped forward from the balcony, looking down at him as if inspecting art she didn't like. Good morning, she called, or whichever time death prefers to operate. Voldemort's head tilted upward, and the sound that escaped him was not quite a laugh but carried its shape. Ah, the girl who plucks curses like weeds. You've grown redundant, Wednesday said. History doesn't need you anymore. He smiled. Then history will be corrected. The wards shattered. The sound was like glass collapsing across the world. The assault began instantly. Spells screamed through rain, red, green, white, black. The ground erupted, castle tremors clanged towers like chimes. Dumbledore barked orders. Minerva and Snape led flanking defense. Flitwick conjured levitating shield arrays. But Voldemort's magic ate through barriers faster than anyone could rebuild them. Harry and Wednesday were already moving through shattered courtyards and flickering lightning. She crafted shadows into serpentine guardians, weaving them across fallen students, blocking curses midair. Her magic didn't shine, it absorbed. Harry fought at her flank. He wasn't the same boy from last year. His spells came harder, truer. The clarity she'd carved into him showed. When he shouted a curse, it thundered like an echo of her own voice beside his. When curses hit, she turned them aside. When spells missed, she redirected them. Their rhythm was alarmingly fluid, more duet than alliance. Left, Harry shouted once, dodging green flare. Wednesday turned, snapped her wand horizontally, and the attacker vanished. No blast, no scream, just erasure. Ron gaped. What was that? Selective removal, Hermione said shakily. That, she erased his existence here. Temporarily. Temporarily? Well, Hermione muttered, that's the kind version. Through it all, Dumbledore faced Voldemort directly near the northern wall, two forces of myth colliding. Light against rot, but Voldemort wasn't fighting for victory anymore. He was fighting to feel infinite again. Every curse he threw was desperation disguised as arrogance. He wanted to prove to himself that he could still touch eternity. Wednesday knew this. She hadn't entered the main ring yet, waited, observed, strategy first. When she finally descended the wall toward Dumbledore's duel, the battlefield trembled. Harry saw her go and followed. Hermione tried to stop him, failed. Voldemort saw her approach and slowed. Recognition flared behind red eyes. This isn't your fight, child. Wednesday walked straight through falling ash. Everything that pollutes existence is my fight. Lightning flared, but not sky lightning, bone lightning. The pendant at her throat glowed, old energy resurrecting. Voldemort's wand twisted, curses split the air into ribbons of green fire. Wednesday caught the first and dissected it with one hand. Shadows fractured, reforming around her fingers like claws. She threw them outward, sculpting death into shape, black tendrils that seized green fire and turned it back on its source. The ground cracked. Voldemort staggered half a step, eyes narrowing. You dare mimic death's craft? She smiled faintly, stepping closer. We invented it. The next curse hit point blank, blinding green, Avada Kedavra amplified. She didn't dodge. She met it and absorbed it. The bone relic at her neck shattered into powder. Her wand cracked halfway along its length, but she kept walking. Harry shouted her name. Ron grabbed him. Hermione screamed something about magical backlash. Nobody could reach her. In every record of power ever written, there's a moment people stop being participants and become phenomena. Wednesday crossed that threshold now. Her aura moved through the air like pressure, lighting everything it touched darker. Her hair whipped against wind that had stopped obeying physics, and then quiet. I tire of theatrics, she said, voice low but resonant enough to carry through thunder. Let's end this. She raised her broken wand, pressed it forward, and whispered, Unmake. The spell didn't explode, it inverted. Silence expanded outward, consuming sound itself. Where it passed, reality tore thin, no flames, no light, only cancellation. Voldemort froze as the edge reached him. Dumbledore shouted a counter-curse to shield survivors. Snape flung protective sigils around Harry from yards away. The wave hit Voldemort full force. His body convulsed, pure magic separating from flesh. He screamed. Not human, not intelligent, raw existence refusing to fade. Harry felt it burn inside his ribs, the remnant echo of the connection that used to tie them. It was vanishing, severing completely. Wednesday walked closer. He tried to stop her. "You'll die." She didn't look back. Then it's symmetrical. She reached him. Voldemort clawed the air, half-dissolved skin glowing. "Wrong. You don't understand." "I understand completely," she said. "You wanted eternity, but eternity doesn't want you." She touched his chest with her bare hand. Every spell she'd ever learned, every law she'd ever broken, fused into that one instant. Power surged through her palm. Death recognized its descendant. Then sound returned. Voldemort imploded inward. Smoke, shadow, muscle, magic, all vacuumed into a single black fissure no wider than a breath. The ground closed. The air cleared. He was gone. Not dead, not defeated, erased. The bone pendant fell apart entirely, scattering dust across her palm. Wednesday turned, blood staining the corner of her mouth. There, clean, and collapsed. Harry caught her before she hit stone, pulling her close. Her pulse was faint but steady. "You did it," he said, voice breaking. "Yes," she breathed. "Predictable outcome." "Stop pretending," he said, choking. "You saved everyone." Wednesday opened her eyes halfway, blurry, soft focus. Saving people wasn't the plan. It worked. A faint trickle of laughter escaped her, weak, quiet, beautiful for once in its lack of cynicism. Then by accident, "I'm heroic." She passed out. Hours later, the storm broke. The castle's wards brightened again. Ghosts whispered through halls in awe. Even portraits refused to speak. Dumbledore stood over the crater where Voldemort had stood, wand lowered, eyes wet. He whispered, "It's over." Snape nearby muttered, "For now." They carried Wednesday to the infirmary. She woke near midnight, bandaged, weak but conscious. Harry sat beside her, his face smeared, eyes raw. She turned her head, voice rasping. "Alive, I assume. Both of us," Harry said. Barely, she nodded faintly. "Good, I wasn't finished being sarcastic." He smiled, relief slamming through him like light. Then she reached for his wrist, her fingers cold but deliberate. "Next time," she said softly, "don't wait for me to start the fight." "There won't be a next time," he said. "He's gone." "Everyone says that," she murmured, eyes closing again, "until something else remembers how to hate." But her hand stayed on his wrist until sleep took her, a small anchor between two survivors who'd remade everything and still didn't quite believe they could stop fighting. Outside, dawn finally came properly. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, it rose over a world where Voldemort no longer existed, not by prophecy, not by mercy, but because someone unafraid of darkness had taught it what real obliteration looked like. Chapter 12. What remains the first sunrise after the war came as something uncertain, too bright, too clean, almost arrogant in its innocence. The sky over Hogwarts was blue again, streaked with smoke yet defiant. For a long time, nobody moved. It was as if the castle itself, sentient and scarred, was unwilling to break the stillness. Wednesday Addams lay in the infirmary. Around her, the room smelled faintly of healing potions, burnt herbs, and iron. She was awake, not fully recovered, but her eyes were open, and that was enough for the castle to breathe again. Harry sat beside her, arms crossed on the edge of the bed. He looked older than he had before the battle, not in the physical sense, but in the way silence had settled inside him. There was no scar pain now, no flickering intrusion in his thoughts. When he looked at her, there was only clarity. "You don't look nearly dead enough for what happened," he said. Wednesday's reply came without turning her head. "Disappointing, I'm sure." "Not to me," Harry said. "Spare me emotional gratitude," Wednesday murmured. "It makes my skin itch." Harry smiled faintly. "Fine, no gratitude. Just curiosity, dangerous habit. Why didn't you die?" It wasn't a challenge. It was genuine bewilderment, a question asked by someone who had seen her defy the very architecture of magic and lived to talk about it. Wednesday's lips grew thinner, because death wasn't interested. "Not interested. I was too familiar." Harry laughed softly, shaking his head. "You're unbelievable. I've been accused of worse," she said, "and acquitted every time." But when she turned her eyes toward him, pale, alert, tired, the humor dropped away. "It's done. He's gone. I erased his anchor. The rest followed. You're free." "Free," Harry echoed, staring at his hands. "I don't even know what to do with that word anymore." "Start small," she said. "Maybe learn to rest without guilt." Outside, the castle was recovering with stubborn dignity. Half the eastern wall had collapsed during the battle. Stoneworkers were already repairing it. Teachers moved among students with exhausted gentleness. Magical creatures wandered closer to the grounds than usual. The forbidden forest boundaries pulsed faintly, as if acknowledging debt. Hogwarts had survived everything except silence. Now it had that too. From the windows, Wednesday watched, bandaged arm resting on the sill, observing human behavior like a sociologist studying chaos rendered calm. She watched Hagrid rebuild the paddocks, McGonagall levitate debris with silent precision. Even Peeves seemed subdued, his usual mischief replaced by something closer to reverence. Harry joined her. "The ministry's sending envoys," he said. "They want to question everyone, you especially." Wednesday didn't look away. "They dislike anything they can't categorize. They'll want to know how you ended him. Then I'll tell them efficiently. Not gonna tell them the details." "No," Wednesday said calmly. "Truth is wasted on bureaucrats." Harry leaned against the wall beside her, arms folded. "You know, I think Dumbledore might actually agree with you for once." "Don't tempt me to be smug," Wednesday replied. "I'm still healing." Harry was quiet for a while, then, "They're calling you a hero. Unfortunate." "Why? Heroes make people complacent. They assume someone else will fix the next disaster." He frowned. "You fixed the last one." "I corrected it," she said. "There's a difference." Harry turned to face her. "You know, you really could stay. I don't belong here." "That's nonsense." "No," she said softly. "It's symmetry. I came to end something. It's ended." He didn't answer. Outside, wind stirred the lake. No serpent coils, no unnatural motion, only living water returning to its ordinary rest. By evening, Hogwarts held its first memorial. The great hall transformed, floating candles replaced broken torches, banners restored but muted. Teachers spoke words of remembrance, survivors wept, names carved into air shimmered and vanished as each was spoken. Wednesday didn't attend the ceremony at first. She stood in the doorway watching. The emotional pageantry made her itch, but she didn't leave. Harry found her there again, as he always seemed to. "You could at least pretend to care," he said. "I do care," she said. "I simply despise ceremony. You risked your life for all of us." "Risked, yes, for obligation, not affection." Harry studied her carefully. "I don't believe you." "Disbelief flatters me." But when Dumbledore began speaking, slow, grave, his tone less preach than eulogy, Wednesday's gaze softened. For a moment she didn't look like a warrior or a prodigy or an anomaly. She looked like someone who understood loss too intimately to perform for it. Beside her, Harry whispered, "They'll never really understand what you did." "I prefer it that way," Wednesday said. "Understanding breeds replication." Harry smiled faintly. "So you really are an Addams." Wednesday turned to him, expression half amused, half tender, what passed in her world for emotion. "We endure, Potter. That's what Addams do." Later that night, when the candles had dimmed and the crowd dispersed, Dumbledore found her alone in the courtyard. Rain had begun falling lightly again, almost polite. He approached quietly. "Miss Addams, headmaster, you've done what few could imagine and even fewer would attempt." "I'm aware. Are you leaving?" She looked up at him, unreadable as ever. "Soon. You know," he said softly, "I once believed darkness needed conquering. You taught me it needed understanding." "That was never the goal," Wednesday said. "I taught you competence." Dumbledore smiled faintly. "And humility. You provided that yourself," she said, "usually by accident." He chuckled, tired and genuine. "Hogwarts owes you more than I can express." "I don't accept debts," Wednesday said quietly. "They breed expectations." "Then permit me gratitude." "If you insist," she said, though her voice lacked actual resistance. He inclined his head, then turned to go. "Headmaster," she called softly before he vanished into rain. "You did the right thing in the end." He paused. "I believed I was doing that all along. That," she said, "was the problem." He nodded slightly, accepting the rebuke as gift. Then he was gone. In the Slytherin common room, abandoned, half-lit, full of echoes, Wednesday packed. She wasn't sentimental about it. No notes, no mementos. Not her style. She placed 2 items in her case, the broken wand she'd reforged in secret and Snape's glass vials, untouched since the battle. She left the case open briefly, staring at it, thinking her family would be proud, not for heroism, for completion. Addamses didn't fight for praise, they fought to finish what offended them. This had been offensive. She fixed it, that was all. Hermione knocked on the open frame. "You're really leaving?" "Yes." "Where will you go?" "Home." Hermione crossed her arms. "You could teach, you could help rebuild." Wednesday regarded her levelly. "Helpfulness is for saints. I prefer results." Hermione half smiled. "You were unbelievable here." "I often am," Wednesday said. "At least say goodbye properly," Hermione said, meaning with words, not existential statements. Wednesday hesitated, then said, "You were wise enough to question me politely. I respect that." Hermione blinked. "That's your version of goodbye, isn't it? It's practically affectionate." "Then affection accepted," Hermione said softly. "Thank you. Don't start thanking me," Wednesday warned. "It'll become habit." Outside, Harry waited where the Hogwarts gates met the path down to Hogsmeade, black cloak, wind striking his hair across his face. He saw her descend the steps, case in hand, posture as sure as ever, though she still moved slower than before. I thought I'd see you off, he said. That's unnecessary, Wednesday replied, still doing it anyway. She stopped a few feet from him. Did anyone ever tell you that stubbornness isn't bravery? You did, Harry said, right before you saved the world. Wednesday's dark eyes softened imperceptibly, the corner of her mouth curving. Then I retracted. Rain fell heavier now, soaking through cloaks, turning gravel to silver dust at their feet. For one fleeting moment, neither moved nor spoke. Everything they'd endured hung between them, words unspoken, losses shared. He said, "You changed everything, you know." I was just honest, Wednesday said. That's what changed everything. Wednesday stared at him, silent, then she reached out, touched his sleeve, just once, brief, almost imperceptible. "If you ever need help," she said, "send a shadow." Harry's brow furrowed. A shadow, they know how to find me. Wind cut through the rain, sharp, cold. They looked at each other one last time. "Goodbye, Harry Potter," she said. "Goodbye, Wednesday Addams." She turned. The air around her shimmered faintly, then folded, that unnerving ripple of old magic pulling her into distance. When it cleared, she was gone. The rain stopped as abruptly as it had begun. Across the horizon, the Addams estate awaited, centuries old, endless, half alive. Somewhere far off, the world balanced itself anew. Harry stood alone before the gates. The sky above Hogwarts burned clean, light settling across the repaired stones. He looked toward the lake. Its surface reflected only blue now, no serpents, no ghosts. Freedom felt heavy. But Harry knew what Wednesday would say about that. Darkness was never erased, it was understood. And after all, he thought, staring at the horizon, she taught him how. Epilogue, the shadow between stars. Winter had returned to England, thin sunlight casting fractured reflections across the moors. London looked ordinary again, carriages, chimneys, smoke that knew nothing of war, but magic was different now. The air felt cleaner, quieter, like chaos had been scrubbed from the world's edges. In a hidden room beneath Grimmauld Place, Harry Potter sat at a desk covered with parchment. Aura reports, reconstruction plans, letters from the ministry demanding statements on unorthodox curse-breaking procedures. He ignored most of them. Outside, snow fell silently across the city. Inside, on the desk, he kept one thing that wasn't paperwork, a small black rose pressed flat between glass, impossible to wilt. He'd woken one morning and found it there, no note, no mark, just the rose. A shadow had crossed his window the night before, darker than the sky, thinner than dream. He knew what it meant. Wednesday Addams was alive somewhere, watching. He smiled faintly, rubbed at the scar that no longer burned, and whispered, "You always did pick interesting timing." Then he turned back to his work. The world still broke itself in small ways. Someone had to fix it. Across the ocean, in a house that delighted in being haunted, Wednesday Addams wrote a letter by candlelight. The Addams estate breathed the way she remembered, walls humming with restless ghosts, corridors whispering names of ancestors who applauded every scandal. The storm outside clung to the windows, lightning tracing runes in wet light. She dipped her pen, wrote carefully. "To Mr. Potter, life continues regardless of victory. You now owe me a favor. I'll collect it when darkness turns to boredom again. Until then, stay adequately alive." She folded it neatly, sealed it with black wax, and let the shadow at her elbow dissolve to carry it away. When it left, she turned her gaze to the fire. She felt the world's new balance and found it acceptable, if slightly dull. The dead stopped whispering as often now, even curses behaved themselves. It was almost boring. She smiled softly. How disappointing. Then she stood, retrieving her coat from the back of the chair. Outside, beyond her window, the horizon trembled, a flicker, a pulse, something tearing loose far from England. "Was that a ripple?" she murmured. The shadow that returned from delivering her letter answered in hiss and echo. "Another has begun to pretend immortality." Wednesday closed her eyes. How tedious. Her fingers tightened around the pendant at her throat, reforged bone, re-enchanted since the battle, glowing faint. "You'll fetch the train tickets," she told the shadow. "Tell Mother I'll be late for dinner." The shadow bowed and vanished. Wednesday turned toward the mirror, hair dark, eyes darker. For a moment her reflection smiled back with all its terrible promise. "Back to work," she said. Lightning cracked, and somewhere far away magic replied softly, almost fondly. The darkness had missed her. Prologue: the immortal pretender snow fell sideways over Yorkshire that night, driven by winds strong enough to make windows scream. The world looked ordinary. It never was. Deep beneath the countryside, where the land dropped into caverns no map acknowledged, something stirred, old, slow, and painfully alive. A vault that had been sealed since before Hogwarts was founded trembled as the last of its locks failed. The air shook with the noise of rebirth. Magic crawled free, brittle and wrong. Not Voldemort's magic, this was older. The kind of sorcery spoken of in Addams' family records as the pre-human impulse toward permanence, an arrogance stripped of personality, given language by fools who thought death negotiable. Above ground, in the winding roads between Leeds and the coast, Muggle sensors failed in unison. Clocks froze at midnight, owls refused flight.